Rain taps gently in the distance, softening the edges of the night. This is made for sleep, where history unfolds quietly and without rush. Tonight, we follow the lesser-known life of William Shakespeare, the routines, choices, and quiet turns that rarely make it into the stories we're taught. Let the rain slow the pace of the evening, and if you'd like, let me know how you're doing in the comments and what time it is where you're listening from. You're stepping into the everyday world of late 16th century and early 17th century England, away from the theatres and printed folios. Here, in the regular rhythms of streets, lodgings and households, William Shakespeare lived a life shaped by work, travel and quiet observation. This is the story of his ordinary days. You wake in a room where light filters through small windows. The air smells of wood and wool. Whether you're in Stratford-upon-Avon or in London, mornings begin with simple tasks. You pull on clothes that have been worn before and will be worn again. Shoes are practical. The floor is cool beneath your feet. In Stratford, the house on Henley Street holds the familiar sounds of family. Doors open and close, voices carry from room to room. Your wife, Anne, manages the household. Your children move through their own routines. You spend time here between stretches of work in London, returning to a place where the streets are known and the faces are constant. The house itself is substantial. Timber frames support the walls. The rooms are divided by function. There is a hall for gathering, chambers for sleeping, and a kitchen for cooking. The structure has stood for years. It will stand for years more. You know every corner of it. Your daughters, Susanna and Judith, have their own lives within the household. Susanna is the elder, serious and capable. Judith is quieter and more reserved. You see them when you return from London. The time between visits means you notice their growth in sudden jumps rather than gradual changes. Anne is practical. She manages the property, oversees the servants and handles daily necessities. Your marriage is not passionate, but it is functional. You respect each other. You fulfill your roles. When you're home, you share meals and discuss household matters. When you are away, she continues without you. The town of Stratford is small enough that everyone knows everyone. You walk through the streets and greet neighbours, the baker, the smith, the tailor. These are people you have known since childhood. They know your family. They know your business. There is comfort in this familiarity. The River Avon runs through the town. You walk along it sometimes, watching the water move. The sound is constant and soothing. In summer, the banks are green. In winter, they are bare. The river marks the seasons more clearly than the calendar. London is different. The city is larger, louder, and more crowded. You lodge in rooms near the Thames or in neighbourhoods where theatre workers gather. The buildings lean close together. Smoke rises from chimneys. The river moves steadily, carrying boats and barges. You walk the same routes often enough that your feet know the turns. Your lodgings in London change over the years. You move from one set of rooms to another. Sometimes you stay with other theatre people. Sometimes you rent a space above a shop. The accommodations are temporary. You do not invest in making them comfortable. They are places to sleep and work, nothing more. The city streets are busy from the early morning until late evening. Carts rumble over cobblestones. Vendors call out their wares. Apprentices hurry to complete errands. You navigate through the crowd without much thought. The motion is automatic. You pass the same landmarks daily. Certain churches, certain bridges, certain corners where streets meet. These markers help you orient yourself. Even on foggy mornings or dark evenings, you know where you are by the shape of buildings and the sounds around you. Mornings in London begin with the sounds of carts and voices. You leave your lodging and step into streets already busy with work. Bakers, brewers, merchants and labourers move through their own schedules. You pass them without much notice. The rhythm of the city is constant and you are part of it. The smell of the city is distinctive, smoke from fires. The tang of the river, horse dung in the streets, cooking food, unwashed bodies. You stop noticing after a while. It becomes background, like the noise. You walk to the theatre. The globe stands south of the river, a round wooden structure visible from a distance. You cross the Thames by boat or bridge, depending on the weather and the time. The water is cold in winter and calm in summer. Boatmen call out to passengers. You pay your fare and step aboard. The boat ride is brief. You sit or stand among other passengers. Some are going to the theatre as workers or patrons. Others have different destinations. The boat rocks gently. The boatman works the oars with practiced efficiency. You watch the water or the far bank. The walk from the bridge to the theatre takes you through streets lined with workshops and homes. You see the same buildings, the same signs, and the same corners. The route becomes automatic. Your mind wanders while your feet carry you forward. You think about the work ahead, a scene that needs revision, a line that felt awkward in yesterday's rehearsal, a conversation you need to have with an actor. These thoughts occupy you as you walk. Inside the theatre, the day's work begins. The space is open to the sky in the centre. Wooden benches and galleries surround the stage. The smell of sawdust and costumes fills the air. Actors arrive and prepare. You speak with them about the day's performance or the next rehearsal. The conversations are practical. Lines are reviewed. Blocking is adjusted. Costumes are checked. The stage itself is a raised platform. Trapdoors allow actors to enter from below. The balcony above serves as battlements, bedrooms, or upper windows depending on the play. The architecture is simple but versatile. You write with these physical constraints in mind. The backstage area is cramped. Costumes hang on pegs. Props are stacked in corners. Actors change quickly, pulling on robes or armour. The space is organised chaos. Everyone knows where things are supposed to be, even if they are not always there. You write in the mornings or afternoons, depending on the schedule. A table, a chair, paper, and ink. The tools are simple. You sit and work through scenes, revising lines that felt rough the day before. The process is slow. You cross out words, rewrite phrases, and test rhythm aloud to yourself. Writing is not magical. It is work that requires focus and repetition. The ink you use is black and thin. It flows from the quill easily when the quill is sharp. When the point dulls, the writing becomes scratchy. You sharpen the quill with a small knife. The motion is familiar. You have done it thousands of times. Paper is expensive, but not prohibitively so. You use it carefully. Margins are filled with notes. Crossed out lines remain visible beneath new ones. Each sheet represents money, so waste is minimized. You read what you've written aloud. Hearing the words reveals problems that reading silently does not. A rhythm that seemed fine on the page sounds awkward when spoken. A line that felt clever feels forced. You adjust accordingly. Between rehearsals and performances, there are hours to fill. You walk, you observe, you listen to conversations in markets and taverns. People speak about their work, their families, and their complaints. You remember fragments of speech, turns of phrase, and the way anger or humour sounds in different voices. These pieces find their way into your writing later. The marketplace is particularly rich with material. Arguments over prices, flirtations between vendors and customers, complaints about the weather or the quality of goods. You watch and listen without seeming to. People do not perform when they think they are unobserved. Their natural behaviour is more interesting than any performance. You notice physical details, how a merchant shifts his weight when lying, how a woman adjusts her shawl when cold, how a child tugs at a parent's sleeve for attention. These small gestures reveal character. You file them away. In Stratford, the pace is slower. You walk through the town and into the countryside. Fields stretch out in all directions. The air is quieter. You visit family, handle business matters, and attend to property. There are documents to sign, rents to collect, and agreements to make. These tasks are necessary and unremarkable. You own property in and around Stratford. Some of it produces income. Some of it is for your family's use. You check on these properties when you are home. You speak with tenants. You inspect buildings for needed repairs. The work is mundane but important. The countryside around Stratford offers space and silence. You walk along paths you have known since childhood. The landscape changes with the seasons but remains fundamentally the same. Hills in the distance, fields divided by hedgerows, sheep grazing. The occasional farmhouse. You think while walking, not focused thoughts but a kind of mental wandering. Ideas for scenes, memories, observations about people you have seen. The walking itself helps the thinking. Movement and thought are connected. You eat midday meals wherever you happen to be. In London, this might mean a tavern near the theatre or a stall selling bread and cheese. In Stratford, meals are taken at home. The food is plain and filling. Bread, meat, vegetables and ale. You eat without ceremony and return to your work. Taverns in London vary in quality. Some are clean and well kept. Others are dark and smell of old beer. You choose based on location and familiarity rather than quality. As long as the food is edible and the ale is drinkable, the tavern serves its purpose. You sit at communal tables. Strangers sit beside you. Sometimes conversation starts. Sometimes everyone eats in silence. You are comfortable with both. You can be social when it serves you. You can be invisible when you prefer. The bread is coarse and dense. It fills your stomach. The meat is whatever is available that day. Beef, mutton, pork and chicken. It is cooked simply, roasted or boiled. Vegetables are mostly roots. Turnips, carrots and onions. They are soft from long cooking. Afternoons bring performances or more writing. If a play is being staged, you watch from the side or assist with last-minute changes. The actors perform the same lines you wrote, but they add their own interpretations. You notice what works and what does not. You make mental notes for future revisions. The audience is varied. Groundlings stand in the yard, close to the stage. They are loud and active. They heckle, laugh, and gasp. Their reactions are immediate. The wealthier patrons sit in the galleries. They are quieter but no less engaged. You gauge the audience's response. When do they lean forward? When do they shift restlessly? When do they laugh? When do they fall silent? These reactions tell you what is working. A joke that lands in rehearsal might fall flat in performance. A serious moment might get an unexpected laugh. You adjust future performances based on what you learn. If a scene drags, you tighten it. If a joke misses, you replace it. The plays are not fixed. They evolve with each performance. When there is no performance, the afternoon is open. You might read, walk, or visit someone. Time is not scarce, but it is not wasted. You move through the hours with purpose, even when the purpose is simply rest. Reading offers its own pleasures. You read histories, classical texts, and poetry by other writers. The reading informs your writing without direct imitation. You absorb styles, ideas, and structures. Later they emerge transformed in your own work. You read in your lodging or in quiet corners of the theatre. The light needs to be good. You cannot read by candlelight for long without your eyes tiring. Daylight is better. You position yourself near a window when possible. Some books are borrowed, some are purchased. Books are valuable. You treat them carefully. You do not mark the pages or bend the covers. When you finish, you return borrowed books promptly. Evenings approach gradually. The light changes. Shadows lengthen. The city begins to settle. In London, you return to your lodging or meet colleagues at a tavern. In Stratford, you remain at home. The transition from day to night is gentle. The quality of light in late afternoon is soft. The harsh brightness of midday fades. Colours become richer. Shadows are longer and more dramatic. You notice these changes. They affect your mood without you thinking about it consciously. In summer, the days are long. Evening seems delayed. You work later because the light permits it. In winter, darkness comes early. You adjust your schedule accordingly. The seasons dictate rhythms. You do not live a life of constant excitement. The days are built from routine. You walk the same streets, see the same faces, and perform the same tasks. This repetition is not dull. It provides structure. It allows you to notice small changes, to refine your observations, and to build a life that supports your work. The routine is comforting. You know what each day will bring. There are variations, but the overall pattern remains consistent. This predictability allows you to focus on the work rather than on logistics. You develop habits. You wake at the same time. You eat at the same times. You work during the same hours. These habits create efficiency. You do not waste energy deciding what to do next. You simply follow the pattern. Your relationship with both cities is practical. London offers work, income, and connection to the theatre world. Stratford offers family, property, and a slower pace. You move between them regularly, adjusting to each place as needed. Neither feels more real than the other. Both are part of your life. The journey between the cities takes 2 or 3 days depending on conditions. You travel on horseback or by coach. The roads are rough in places, smooth in others. Rain makes them muddy. Dry weather makes them dusty. You stop at the same inns along the way. The innkeepers recognise you. They know your preferences. A room that is quiet. A meal that is simple. Ale that is fresh. These small familiarities make travel easier. You carry very little with you when you travel. A few clothes, papers, and money. The journey between Stratford and London takes time, but it is familiar. You know the roads, the inns along the way, and the rhythms of travel. You do not rush. You arrive when you arrive. The landscape changes as you travel. Flat fields give way to rolling hills. Villages appear and disappear. You watch the scenery without much interest. It is pleasant, but not captivating. The real interest is in arriving, not in the journey itself. Other travellers share the roads. Merchants, messengers, and farmers bringing goods to market. You exchange greetings or nods. Sometimes you ride alongside someone for a stretch. Sometimes you travel alone. At night, you settle into whichever space you occupy. The room is dark or lit by a single candle. You prepare for sleep by setting aside the day's concerns. Tomorrow will bring more of the same work, the same streets, and the same routines. This predictability is comforting. You know what to expect. The transition from waking to sleeping is gradual. You do not fight it. You let tiredness overtake you. The day ends. The night begins. Sleep will restore you for whatever tomorrow brings. You earn your living by writing. This is not a romantic pursuit. It is a job that requires discipline, skill, and attention to deadlines. The theatre company depends on new material. Audiences expect variety. You provide both. Your writing process is methodical. You sit with paper and ink. You begin with an idea, a character, or a situation. The first draft is rough. Words come quickly, but they are not always the right words. You write through scenes, testing dialogue, building conflicts, and moving characters from one moment to the next. The initial inspiration for a play can come from anywhere. A story you heard, a historical event, an old play you want to improve, a character type you want to explore. The source matters less than what you do with it. You often work from existing stories, histories of English kings, Italian tales, Roman biographies. These provide frameworks. You adapt them, change them, and reshape them to suit your purposes. The bones of the story come from elsewhere. The flesh is your own. Revision is where the real work happens. You read what you have written, you cross out lines that feel false, you rewrite speeches that lack rhythm, you tighten scenes that drag. The process is slow and repetitive. You might spend days on a single act, adjusting until it feels right. You read passages aloud to yourself. The sound matters. A line that looks good on paper might not sound right when spoken. The rhythm needs to match the meaning. Stressed syllables need to fall in the right places. You count beats. 5 beats per line for most speeches, 10 syllables. The pattern is flexible, not rigid. You break it when breaking it serves the meaning. but the underlying rhythm provides structure. You revise dialogue to sound like speech, not like writing. People interrupt each other. They leave sentences unfinished. They repeat themselves. They use contractions. Your written dialogue needs to capture this naturalness while remaining clear enough for an audience to follow. The plays are written for performance, not publication. You write with the voices of specific actors in mind. You know their strengths, their ranges, and the types of roles they perform best. This knowledge shapes your characters. You give certain actors the roles that suit them. The writing is collaborative in this way, even when you are alone at the table. Richard Burbage gets the leading tragic roles. He has the voice and presence for them. Will Kempe and later Robert Armin get the comic roles. They can improvise, and you write space for them to do so. The boy actors play the women. You write female roles that suit their voices and abilities. You know who will be available for each production. If a key actor is ill or away, you adjust. You rewrite roles. You redistribute lines. The play must go on, so you make it work. You also write poetry. Sonnets are longer narrative poems. These are different from plays. The structure is tighter. The language is denser. You write them for patrons, for publication, and for your own satisfaction. The income from poetry is less predictable than the income from plays, but it adds variety to your work. The sonnets follow a strict form, 14 lines, a particular rhyme scheme, specific metre. The constraints are part of the appeal. You find freedom within the restrictions. The form forces you to be precise. You write narrative poems on commission. A patron requests a poem on a particular subject. You research, plan, draft, and revise. The work is similar to writing plays, but with different technical demands. The language can be more elaborate. There is no need to consider how it will sound on stage. The theatre business is not just writing. You're part of a company. You attend meetings. You discuss which plays to stage, which roles to cast, and which costumes to commission. You help manage finances, divide profits, and handle disputes. The work is administrative and necessary. The company is organised as a partnership. Several members own shares. You are one of them. This gives you a say in decisions and a share of the profits. It also means you share the risks. If a play fails, everyone loses money. Meetings can be contentious. Different shareholders have different priorities. Someone wants to stage a particular type of play. Someone else disagrees. You argue. You compromise. Eventually decisions are made. Financial matters are complex. Ticket sales, cost for costumes and props, rent for the theatre space, and payments to actors and musicians. The accounts must be kept carefully. Errors can lead to losses or disputes. Rehearsals fill many hours. You sit with actors and read through scenes. You clarify intentions. You suggest line readings. You adjust blocking when something feels off. The actors offer their own ideas. You listen. Sometimes their suggestions improve the work. Sometimes you hold firm to your original vision. Blocking is the physical movement on stage. Who enters from where? Who stands where during a conversation? Who moves when? These decisions affect how the audience understands relationships and intentions. You work with the actors to find natural movements. An actor might instinctively turn away during a particular line. This reveals something about the character. You notice and incorporate it. Some actors need more direction than others. Experienced actors bring their own interpretations. Younger actors need guidance. You adjust your approach based on who you are working with. Props and costumes are discussed during rehearsals. Does this character need a sword? Should this character wear a cloak? These are practical questions with artistic implications. The visual elements support the story. Performances are the culmination of weeks or months of work. You watch from backstage or from the galleries. The audience responds in real time. They laugh, gasp, grow silent, or lose interest. Their reactions tell you what works. You take note. Future plays will reflect what you learn here. The groundlings are the most vocal. They shout comments. They boo villains. They cheer heroes. Their energy affects the performance. Actors feed off it. The galleries are quieter, but you can still gauge their engagement. Do they lean forward during tense moments? Do they whisper to each other during boring stretches? You watch and learn. Some performances go better than others. The actors might be particularly sharp one day. The audience might be particularly receptive. Everything clicks. Other days, the performance is flat. The actors miss cues. The audience is restless. You accept both. The theatre is a commercial enterprise. Success is measured in ticket sales and repeat performances. You write plays that people want to see. This does not mean you write only for popularity, but you are aware of audience preferences. You balance your own interests with what will draw a crowd. Comedies generally draw larger crowds than tragedies. People want to laugh. They want entertainment. But tragedies have their audience too. The key is variety. You write different types of plays to appeal to different moods. Historical plays are popular. English audiences want to see stories about their own kings and battles. You give them these stories, shaped to emphasise themes you find interesting. You write quickly when needed. A play can be completed in weeks if the company requires it. Other times, you take longer. You revise old plays for new productions. You adapt stories from history, from Italian sources, and from English legends. The source material is a starting point. The finished play is your own. Speed does not necessarily mean lower quality. Some of your best work comes quickly. The ideas are clear. The execution is smooth. Other plays labour along, requiring extensive revision. You keep old drafts. Sometimes you return to a play you wrote years ago and see ways to improve it. You revise, and the company stages the new version. The play is renewed. Your income comes from several streams. The theatre company pays you for new plays. You receive a share of profits from performances. Patrons commission poems. You invest in property. The combination provides stability. You're not wealthy, but you are secure. The share of profits varies depending on how well the play performs and how many performances are staged. A popular play brings in significant money. A play that closes after a few performances brings in little. Patronage is less reliable, but potentially more lucrative. A wealthy patron might pay handsomely for a poem, but patrons are unpredictable. Their favour can shift. You do not depend on patronage alone. Property investment is your long-term security. You buy land and buildings in Stratford. These provide rental income. They will support your family after you stop working. The investments are practical, not speculative. Writing is solitary, but it exists within a social structure. You rely on actors, stagehands, musicians, and managers. They rely on you. The work is interdependent. A play is not complete until it is performed, and it cannot be performed without all these parts working together. The musicians provide interludes and accompaniment. They play before the performance, during scene changes, and sometimes during scenes. Their music sets the mood. You consult with them about what is needed. Stagehands manage the physical elements. They move props. They operate the trapdoors. They handle the curtains. Their work is invisible to the audience but essential to the performance. The theatre manager handles business matters, scheduling, ticket sales, negotiations with authorities. You work with him to ensure the company operates smoothly. You keep notebooks, small observations, fragments of dialogue and ideas for scenes. You write things down when they occur to you. Later you return to these notes. Some become plays. Others remain notes. The process of collecting and refining is ongoing. The notebooks are small enough to carry with you. You pull them out when something strikes you. A phrase overheard in the market, an interesting face in the crowd, a situation that could become a scene. You do not organise the notebook systematically. Ideas are recorded as they come. When you need something, you page through until you find it. The disorder does not bother you. The notes are for you alone. The work has its frustrations. Lines you laboured over fall flat in performance. Actors forget cues. Audiences are distracted. Weather affects attendance. The roof leaks during rain. These are practical problems with practical solutions. You adjust and continue. Rain drives away the groundlings. They will not stand in the yard getting soaked. The galleries stay fuller, but the energy is different. You might cut the performance short or cancel entirely. Actors forget lines. It happens. They improvise. They get back on track. If the problem is severe, you add extra rehearsals. You work with the actor individually. You also experience moments of satisfaction. A scene lands exactly as you hoped. An actor delivers a line with perfect timing. The audience is silent during a tense moment, then erupts in laughter or applause. These moments are gratifying, but they do not change the nature of the work. Tomorrow you will return to the table and write again. The satisfaction is brief. You enjoy it in the moment, then move on. There is always more work to do. The next play is already forming in your mind. You do not think of yourself as exceptional. You're a working playwright in a city full of working playwrights. Some are more successful, some are less. You're somewhere in the middle, producing work that is reliable and occasionally excellent. This is enough. Christopher Marlowe was exceptional before his death. Ben Jonson is talented and ambitious. Thomas Dekker writes prolifically. You are one among several. The competition is healthy. It pushes you to improve. The rhythm of writing, rehearsing and performing becomes second nature. You know how long it takes to complete a draft. You know how much time actors need to learn their lines. You know when to push for changes and when to accept what has been done. Experience teaches you these things. You can estimate accurately now. You know a 5-act play will take 6 to 8 weeks to write if you work steadily. You know rehearsals will take 2 to 3 weeks. You know a successful play will run for 12 performances or more. You write in different moods. Sometimes the work flows easily. Other times it is slow and difficult. You do not wait for inspiration. You sit down and write regardless of how you feel. Discipline is more important than mood. On difficult days you produce fewer pages. The words do not come easily. You force them anyway. The forced work can be revised later. The important thing is to keep moving forward. On good days you write more than you expected. The ideas flow. The dialogue sounds right on the first try. You ride the momentum as long as it lasts. Your relationship with your own work is practical. You do not romanticize the process. You do not agonize over every word. You do what is required and move forward. This approach allows you to produce a large body of work over many years. You're proud of some plays more than others. Some represent your best thinking and your finest language. Others are competent but not exceptional. You accept this range. Not everything can be your best work. At the end of the day, you set aside the papers. The ink dries. The words remain on the page. Tomorrow, you will return to them. This is the pattern. Writing is not an event. It is a habit. The papers stack up. Pages of dialogue, notes and revisions. The physical accumulation represents hours of work. You keep the drafts organised well enough to find what you need. You waste paper when necessary. If a page is so heavily revised that it is illegible, you copy it fresh. The time spent copying is worth the clarity. The work continues. There is always another play to write, another performance to attend, and another revision to make. The cycle repeats. This repetition is not tedious. It is the structure of your life. You spend time with other people. The theatre world is small, and the same faces appear regularly. Actors, playwrights, managers, and musicians. You know them by name. You know their habits, their skills, and their temperaments. Richard Burbage is serious about his craft. He prepares thoroughly for roles. He thinks deeply about character. Conversations with him are focused on the work. You respect his dedication. Will Kempe is boisterous. He jokes constantly. His energy fills a room. He can also be difficult. His improvisations sometimes go too far. You have learned to write roles that channel his energy productively. Robert Armin, who replaces Kempe, is more subtle. His humour is verbal rather than physical. You write different types of fools for him. The shift changes the tone of your comedies. Taverns are common gathering places. After a performance or rehearsal, the company goes to a nearby tavern. You sit at a long table with others. Ale is poured. Bread and cheese are shared. Conversations overlap. Someone tells a story. Someone else argues a point. You listen more than you speak, but you contribute when it feels natural. The tavern is warm and noisy. The smell of ale and bodies is strong. The space is crowded. You sit shoulder to shoulder with others. The proximity is comfortable after years of it. You have your preferred seat. Near the end of the table, close enough to hear but not at the centre, this position allows you to participate or withdraw as you choose. The talk is often about work, which plays are drawing crowds, which actors are improving, what other companies are staging. The theatre world is competitive but not hostile. People share information, they offer advice, they complain about shared frustrations. You learn about other companies through these conversations. The Admiral's men are staging a new play by Decker. The children of the chapel are performing at court. This information helps you understand the landscape. It informs your own decisions. You also talk about other things. Politics, gossip, and family matters. The conversations are ordinary. You learn about someone's sick child, someone's new lodging, and someone's dispute with the landlord. These details do not affect you directly, but they are part of the fabric of social life. Politics are discussed cautiously. The authorities monitor public discourse. Saying the wrong thing can lead to trouble. You listen to political talk but contribute little. You are aware of the risks. Gossip is safer and more entertaining. Who is feuding with whom? Who is courting whom? Who has fallen out of favour with a patron? The stories are repeated and embellished. You take them with scepticism. Friendships form slowly. You work with the same people for years. Trust builds through repeated interactions. You rely on certain actors to deliver difficult roles. They rely on you to write parts that suit them. This mutual dependence creates a bond that is professional and personal. You have friends you do not work with often, writers you respect, actors who have moved to other companies. The friendships persist even when work does not connect you. You see each other in taverns, on the street, and at gatherings. You have friends outside the theatre, people from Stratford, neighbours in London, merchants you deal with regularly. These relationships are less intense but still meaningful. You exchange greetings. You help each other with small tasks. You maintain a presence in each other's lives without constant contact. Your family in Stratford is a separate world. Anne manages the household. Your daughters grow older. Your son, Hamnet, is buried in Stratford. This loss is part of your life, but you do not speak of it often. Grief is private, you carry it quietly. Hamnet died in 1596. He was 11. The loss was sudden and painful. You were in London when it happened. By the time you returned to Stratford, he was already buried. The grief did not diminish over time. It simply became part of you. You do not write about the grief directly, but it seeps into your work. Fathers losing sons, children dying young. The themes appear in plays written after his death. The connection is unconscious but real. When you are in Stratford, you participate in local life. You attend church. You visit neighbours. You handle business matters. People know you as a local man who works in London. Your fame as a playwright is secondary to your role as a property owner and family man. Church attendance is required. You go to Holy Trinity Church most Sundays when you're in Stratford. The service is familiar. The same prayers, the same psalms. You sit with your family. The ritual is comforting. You know the vicar. You contribute to church repairs and maintenance. These are expected responsibilities for someone of your standing. You fulfill them without complaint. In London, you are more anonymous. The city is large enough that you can move through it without constant recognition. You are known within the theatre community, but outside it, you are just another man on the street. This anonymity is useful. It allows you to observe without being observed. You can sit in a tavern and listen without people performing for you. You can walk through markets and watch people interact naturally. This freedom to observe is valuable. It feeds your work. You watch people. You notice how they walk, how they speak, and how they react to each other. Markets, streets, taverns, churches. Every space offers examples of human behaviour. You collect these observations. They inform your writing without you thinking about it consciously. A woman haggling over fish, the way she gestures, the tone of her voice when she feels cheated, the expression on the fishmonger's face. You file these details away. A child crying in the street, the parent's response. Impatient, comforting, angry. The interaction reveals the relationship. You remember it. Two men arguing, their postures, their volume, the moment one backs down, the dynamics of power and submission. You note it all. Social gatherings are informal. Someone invites a few people to their lodging. You sit and talk. There is no formal agenda. The conversation drifts from topic to topic. You might discuss a recent play, a piece of news, or a shared acquaintance. The atmosphere is relaxed. The gatherings happen spontaneously. Someone mentions an idea in passing. Others express interest. By evening, a group is assembled. Ale is shared. Stories are told. Laughter fills the room. You enjoy these moments. The easy companionship. The lack of pressure. No one is performing. No one is trying to impress. People are simply present with each other. You do not seek the company of the wealthy or powerful. Your patrons are part of your professional life, but not your social life. You maintain a respectful distance. You fulfill commissions. You express gratitude. You do not pretend to be something you are not. The Earl of Southampton was an early patron. He commissioned your narrative poems. You dedicated Venus and Adonis and the Rape of Lucrece to him. The relationship was cordial but formal. You understand the difference between patron and friend. Patrons provide money. Friends provide companionship. The two are not the same. Your relationships are built on practical foundations. You help people. They help you. You share resources, information, and time. These exchanges are not calculated. They are simply how things work. An actor needs a place to stay. You know someone with a room. You make the introduction. Later, that actor returns the favour in some way. The reciprocity is natural. A playwright needs information about a historical event. You lend him your book. He lends you something later. The exchanges build goodwill. You see the same people in the same places. The predictability is comforting. You know where to find someone if you need them. You know who will be at the tavern after a performance. You know who to ask for help with a particular task. The theatre community has its regular spots. Certain taverns, certain streets, certain shops. You move through these spaces and encounter familiar faces. The rhythm is steady. Conflicts arise occasionally. Someone feels slighted. Someone disagrees with the decision. These disputes are resolved through conversation, compromise, or simply letting time pass. You do not hold grudges. Neither do most of the people you know. The community is too small for long-term enmity. An actor feels he was given a role beneath his abilities. He complains. You explain your reasoning. He accepts it, or he does not. Either way, the work continues. A disagreement about profit sharing. Numbers are reviewed. The accounts are checked. A resolution is reached. The dispute is forgotten. You also spend time alone. Between social engagements, you walk or sit in your lodging. Solitude is necessary. It allows you to process what you've seen and heard. It gives you space to think without distraction. You need solitude to write. Conversation fills your mind with other people's words. Alone, you can hear your own thoughts. The characters can speak. You need solitude to rest. Social interaction, even pleasant interaction, requires energy. Alone, you can simply be. Your social life is neither vibrant nor dull. It is consistent. You see people regularly. You maintain connections. You contribute to shared activities. You receive support when needed. This network of relationships is part of the structure that supports your work and your life. The network is invisible most of the time. You take it for granted. But when you need help, it is there. Someone knows someone who can solve a problem. Information is passed along. Favours are exchanged. At the end of the evening, you part ways with friends and colleagues. You walk back to your lodging. The streets are quieter at night. You move through them without hurry. Tomorrow, you will see many of the same people again. The continuity is reassuring. The familiar faces are comforting. You do not have to explain yourself. You do not have to establish your identity. You are known. You are part of the community. This belonging is simple and deep. Rest is woven into your days. It is not separate from work. It is part of the pattern. You take breaks during writing. After an hour or two at the table, you stand and stretch. You walk to the window. You look out at the street or the river. The movement helps. It clears your mind. When you sit back down, the words come a little easier. Your body grows stiff from sitting. Your back aches. Your shoulders tighten. Standing and moving releases the tension. You roll your neck. You flex your fingers. The relief is immediate. The view from your window changes depending on where you're lodging. Sometimes you see the river. Sometimes you see a narrow street. Sometimes you see a courtyard. The view does not matter much. Looking at something distant rests your eyes. Afternoons often include pauses. If there is no performance scheduled, you might sit in the theatre courtyard. Other company members do the same. You talk quietly or simply sit in silence. The sun is warm. The breeze is cool. These moments are unhurried. The courtyard is paved with stone. Benches line the walls. In summer, the space is pleasant. In winter, it is too cold for lingering. The seasonal rhythm affects how you rest. You watch clouds move across the sky. You notice the angle of the sun. You feel the warmth on your face. These sensations are simple and restorative. Travel between Stratford and London includes rest. The journey takes time. You stop at inns along the way. You eat a meal. You sleep in an unfamiliar bed. The next morning, you continue. The rhythm of travel has its own slowness. The forced rest of travel is different from chosen rest. You cannot work while travelling. You cannot write effectively on horseback or in a jolting coach. You must simply be present in the journey. You watch the landscape. You think. You sometimes drowse in the saddle. The horse knows the road even when your attention wanders. In Stratford, rest looks different. The town is quieter than London. There are fewer demands on your time. You walk through fields. You sit in your garden. You spend time with family without the pressure of performance schedules or writing deadlines. The garden behind your house is modest. Vegetables, herbs, and a few flowers. You sit on a bench and watch things grow. The pace of plant growth is slower than any human activity. Watching it is calming. You pull a few weeds. You inspect the vegetables. These small tasks are restful because they are simple and tangible. The results are immediate and visible. You do not think of rest as indulgence. It is necessary. Your mind needs time to recover from the focus of writing. Your body needs time to recover from the physical demands of travel and city life. Rest is practical. Without rest, your thinking becomes muddy. Words do not come. Ideas feel forced. Rest clears the fog. It restores clarity. Without rest, your body protests. Headaches, stiff joints, exhaustion that sleep alone cannot fix. Rest prevents these problems. You nap occasionally. In the middle of the afternoon, you lie down and close your eyes. The nap is short, not deep. When you wake, you feel refreshed enough to continue the day's work. You do not undress for these naps. You simply lie on the bed or on a bench. You close your eyes. You drift for a quarter hour or half an hour. The rest is light but effective. The room is quiet during these naps. The city sounds fade to the background. Your breathing slows. Your thoughts scatter and dissolve. Waiting is also a form of rest. You wait for actors to arrive at rehearsal. You wait for performances to begin. You wait for the weather to clear before travelling. During these times, you are still. You let your thoughts wander. You notice details around you. Waiting used to frustrate you. Now you accept it. The time will pass whether you are impatient or not. Better to be calm. You observe while waiting. The way light falls on a wall. The sound of someone's footsteps. The smell of bread baking nearby. Waiting becomes observation. Evenings bring a natural slowing. The light fades. Work becomes harder. You accept this and shift your focus. You might read instead of write. You might sit with others instead of sitting alone. The transition is gentle. The transition happens without decision. Your body knows when the working day is ending. Your mind begins to release its focus. You do not fight this. You allow the shift. You rest your eyes by looking at distant things. After hours of reading or writing, you look out the window. You watch people move on the street. You watch clouds or birds. The shift in focus is soothing. Close work strains the eyes. The small letters blur. Your eyes water. Looking at distant objects relaxes the muscles. The blur clears. Physical rest matters. You walk regularly, which keeps your body active, but you also know when to sit or lie down. You do not push yourself to exhaustion. You recognize the signs of fatigue and respond to them. Exhaustion makes you stupid. Your judgment fails. Your patience thins. Rest prevents this deterioration. You protect your capacity to think by protecting your energy. Rest is not always silent. Sometimes you rest by talking with others. The conversation is light. No one is performing or making arguments. You simply exchange words. The social connection itself is restful. Talk about nothing important. The weather, a meal someone enjoyed, a minor inconvenience. The topics do not matter. The companionship is the point. Laughter is restful. A good joke. A funny story. The release of laughter eases tension. You feel lighter afterward. You rest in familiar places. Your lodging in London, your home in Stratford, the theatre when it is empty. These spaces are known. You do not have to navigate or adjust. You can simply be. Familiar spaces require no thought. You know where everything is. You do not have to orient yourself. The mental ease is part of the rest. You have favourite spots, a particular chair, a certain bench in the garden, a corner of the theatre. These places hold associations with rest. Sitting in them triggers relaxation. Sleep is the deepest rest, but it is preceded by smaller forms of rest throughout the day. These pauses accumulate. They prevent the kind of exhaustion that makes work impossible. They sustain you over long periods. The small rests are invisible. You do not think of them as rest, but they add up. They maintain your capacity to work. You do not schedule rest rigidly. It happens naturally. When you are tired, you stop. When you are refreshed, you continue. The rhythm is intuitive. Your body tells you when to rest. Heaviness in the limbs, difficulty concentrating. These signals are reliable. You listen to them. Sometimes rest is interrupted. An urgent matter arises. A performance is scheduled unexpectedly. You adjust. You rest when you can, not always when you prefer. Interruptions are part of life. You do not resent them. You handle what needs handling, then return to rest when possible. The quality of rest varies. Some days, a short break is enough. Other days, you need more. You listen to your body and mind. You respond accordingly. Deep fatigue requires deep rest. A full night's sleep. A day without work. You recognize when you need this and try to provide it. Light fatigue requires less. A brief pause. A walk. A change of activity. You calibrate your response to your need. Rest is not dramatic. It is not an escape or a reward. It is simply part of living. You work, you rest, and you work again. The cycle is steady. The steadiness is reliable. You trust the rhythm. You know rest will come. This trust allows you to work fully because you know restoration is built into the pattern. At the end of the day, rest prepares you for sleep. You slow down gradually. You complete final tasks. You settle your thoughts. By the time you lie down, your body is ready. The evening wind down is deliberate. You do not work until the moment you collapse into bed. You create space between work and sleep. This space eases the transition. You eat simple food. Bread is a constant. It is fresh in the morning and harder by evening. You eat it with butter or cheese. Sometimes you dip it in ale or broth. Bread is the foundation of every meal. When bread is scarce, hunger feels more urgent. When bread is abundant, even a plain meal feels adequate. The bread varies in quality. Sometimes it is light and well risen, sometimes it is dense and coarse. The grain used affects the taste and texture. Wheat bread is preferable, but rye or barley is more common. You develop preferences. Bread from a particular baker, the right degree of doneness. You notice these things without being particular about them. Meals in London are often taken at taverns. You order what is available: meat pies, roasted fowl and vegetables boiled or baked. The food is hot and filling. You eat without ceremony. The plate is emptied. You return to work. Tavern food is reliable in its mediocrity. It is rarely excellent. It is rarely terrible. It serves its purpose, which is to fuel your body for more work. Meat pies are convenient. The crust holds the filling. You can eat while walking if needed. The filling is usually mutton or pork with some gravy. Roasted fowl is chicken or capon, sometimes duck. The meat is cooked until tender. The skin is crisp. You eat it with your fingers, tearing pieces from the carcass. In Stratford, meals are prepared at home. Anne and the household staff cook over the fire. You eat at the table with family. The food is familiar. Mutton, pork, root vegetables and bread. Meals are served at regular times. You know what to expect. The predictability of home-cooked meals is comforting. You know the cook's habits. You know what will be served on particular days. The food is simple but carefully prepared. Anne manages the household accounts and ensures nothing is wasted. Meals are planned around what is available and affordable. You eat together when possible. The family gathers at the table. You say grace. Food is passed. Conversation happens naturally. The meal is a point of connection. Ale is the common drink. Water is less reliable. You drink ale with meals and between meals. It is mild, not strong. It quenches thirst without affecting your ability to work. Ale is brewed locally. The quality varies by brewer. You know which alehouses serve better ale. You prefer them when you have a choice. The ale is slightly sweet and slightly bitter. It has substance. It is more nourishing than water. You drink from wooden or pewter cups. The cups are refilled as needed. Drinking is continuous throughout the day. Wine is occasional. When you have extra money or when a patron offers it, you drink wine. It is richer than ale. You drink it slowly. It accompanies special occasions, not daily routines. Wine is imported and expensive. Red wine from France or Spain. White wine from the Rhine. The taste is complex and unfamiliar to your everyday palate. You appreciate wine when it is offered. You savour it, but you do not crave it. Ale suits you fine. You eat fruit when it is in season. Apples, pears and berries. The fruit is fresh for a brief time, then gone. You enjoy it while it lasts. In winter, you eat dried fruit or none at all. Fresh fruit is a summer pleasure. Berries picked from hedgerows, apples from the orchard. The sweetness and juice are welcome after the heavier foods of winter. Dried fruit keeps through winter. Apples and pears sliced thin and dried. Raisins and currants. They are sweet and chewy. Cheese and eggs are reliable. You eat them often. Cheese is packed for travel. Eggs are cooked in various ways. Both provide nourishment without much preparation. Cheese is hard and keeps well. You cut slices from the wheel. You eat it with bread. The flavour is sharp and salty. Eggs are boiled, fried or scrambled. They are filling and quick to prepare. You eat them for breakfast often. Meals with colleagues are social. You sit together at a long table. Food is passed around. People serve themselves. The conversation continues while you eat. The meal is not the focus, but it creates a shared space. Eating together builds camaraderie. The act of sharing food is bonding. You talk and eat simultaneously. The informality is pleasant. You learn about people over meals, their appetites, their manners, their preferences. These details add to your understanding of them. You do not overeat. Portions are moderate. You eat enough to feel satisfied, not stuffed. Excess is rare and unpleasant. Overeating makes you sluggish. Your mind dulls. Your body feels heavy. You avoid this when possible. You eat until the hunger is gone, then stop. The discipline is automatic. You do not need to think about it. Inns along the road between Stratford and London offer predictable meals. You order the stew or the roast. You drink ale. You eat bread. The quality varies, but the format does not. You know what you are getting. Inn food is utilitarian. It fills the stomach. It provides energy for the next day's travel. You do not expect pleasure from it. Some inns are better than others. You remember which ones. You plan your stops accordingly when possible. Comfort comes from warmth and routine. A hot meal on a cold day, a familiar dish after a long journey, the taste of bread baked the same way your family has always baked it. These small consistencies matter. Hot food on a cold day warms you from the inside. The heat spreads through your body, you feel restored. Familiar food connects you to home, to childhood, to continuity. The taste is memory made tangible. You do not spend much time thinking about food. It is fuel. It is comfort. It is part of the day. You eat when you are hungry. You stop when you are full. Food serves a function. It does not need to be more than adequate. When it is better than adequate, you notice and appreciate it, but you do not require it. Special occasions bring different food. A feast at a patron's house, a celebration with the theatre company. The food is richer and more varied. You enjoy it, but you do not crave it regularly. Feasts include dishes you never eat otherwise. Elaborate roasts, rich sauces, imported delicacies. The abundance is impressive and slightly overwhelming. You eat more at feasts than usual. The social expectation is to partake generously. You do so, though it makes you uncomfortable afterward. You appreciate good cooking. When a meal is well prepared, you notice. You might comment on it. You might ask how something was made, but you do not require excellence. Adequacy is enough. A well-cooked meal is a pleasure. The flavours are balanced. The textures are right. You notice the care that went into it. But most meals are not well cooked. They are adequately cooked. This is acceptable. You do not complain. Hunger is not constant. You eat regularly enough to avoid it. But when hunger does come, it is simple. You find food. You eat. The problem is solved. True hunger is rare. Your income is sufficient to keep you fed. The hunger you feel is usually just the body's signal that it is time to eat again. When you do feel hunger, it sharpens your focus on food. The simplest meal tastes better. Your body's need makes the food more satisfying. Some foods remind you of childhood, certain breads, certain stews. You eat them and remember other times. The memories are not sharp. They are soft and vague, like the comfort the food provides. The bread your mother baked, the stew from feast days. These tastes carry associations. They are pleasant in a way that has nothing to do with the food itself. You eat alone sometimes, in your lodging with a plate and a cup. You chew slowly. You think about the day or about nothing. The solitude is peaceful. Eating alone requires no performance, no conversation, no manners beyond basic cleanliness. You can simply eat. The quiet is meditative, chewing, tasting, swallowing. The actions are simple and grounding. You eat with family in Stratford. The table is full. Conversations happen around you. You participate or you listen. The meal anchors the day. It gathers everyone in one place. Family meals have their own rhythm. Anne serves. The children talk. You listen and occasionally contribute. The structure is familiar and comforting. Meals mark time. Breakfast, dinner, supper. The day is punctuated by these gatherings. You do not waste food. What is left is saved. Bread becomes crumbs for thickening soup. Bones are boiled for broth. Nothing is thrown away lightly. Food costs money and effort. Wasting it is careless. You are raised to value what you have. Leftovers are used creatively. Yesterday's roast becomes today's pie. Stale bread becomes pudding. Drink provides its own comfort. A cup of ale at the end of a long day. A shared drink with a friend. The warmth of it. The taste, the ritual of lifting the cup and drinking. Drinking is social. You toast. You clink cups. You drink together. The act creates connection. A drink at day's end signals transition. Work is done. Rest begins. The drink marks the boundary. You do not drink to excess. You have seen what that does to people. You drink enough to relax, not enough to lose control. Moderation is natural to you. Drunkenness is ugly. Slurred speech, poor judgment, loss of dignity. You avoid this state. 2 or 3 cups of ale are enough. You know your limits. You recognise when you have had enough. You stop before you become impaired. Food and drink are part of the rhythm of life. They mark time. Breakfast, midday meal and evening supper. They provide structure. They offer comfort. They sustain you. The daily rhythm of eating is one of the reliable patterns. No matter what else happens, you will eat. This regularity is reassuring. Food and drink are shared experiences. They connect you to others. They connect you to place. They connect you to yourself. Evenings begin when the light fades. If there has been a performance, it is over. The audience has left. The actors have changed out of their costumes. The theatre is quiet. The theatre after a performance has a particular quality. The energy is dissipated. The space feels larger and emptier. Voices echo differently. Props and costumes are put away. The stage is swept. The work of preparation for tomorrow begins quietly. You leave the theatre and walk back to your lodging. The streets are less crowded than during the day. Shops are closing. People are heading home. You move with the flow of the crowd, then break away to your own path. The evening streets have a different character. The urgency of the day is gone. People walk more slowly. Conversations are quieter. You know the route so well you could walk it in complete darkness. Your feet find the familiar turns without thought. Your lodging is modest. A room with a bed, a table, and a chair. Sometimes a small hearth. The space is functional. You do not need more. You light a candle. The room becomes visible in the soft glow. The candle is tallow, not beeswax. The smell is slightly unpleasant. The flame flickers and smokes. But it provides light, which is what matters. The room is cold in winter. The walls are thin. You light a fire if there is wood. If not, you wrap yourself in a blanket. In summer, the room is stuffy. You open the window if there is one. The air from outside is only slightly fresher than the air inside. You sit at the table. You might read. Books are not abundant, but you have a few. Histories, poetry, and classical texts. You read slowly, absorbing the words. Reading is different from writing. It is receptive rather than active. You own Holinshed's Chronicles, Plutarch's Lives, and Ovid's Metamorphoses. These books are resources for your work and also pleasures in themselves. You read passages you have read before. Familiarity does not diminish the enjoyment. You notice new things in familiar texts. Reading by candlelight is difficult. The light is dim and flickering. You hold the book close. Your eyes tire quickly. Sometimes you do not read. You simply sit. Your mind is still active, but it is not focused on a task. Thoughts drift. You think about a scene you are writing. You think about a conversation from earlier. You think about nothing in particular. The drifting mind finds its own paths. Ideas connect without your direction. This mental wandering is productive in ways that focused thought is not. You might solve a problem that has been troubling you. The solution arrives without effort, emerging from the drifting thoughts. If you are in Stratford, the evening is spent with family. You sit near the fire. Anne might sew or manage household accounts. Your daughters might be nearby. The presence of others is comforting, even when there is little conversation. The fire crackles. The light shifts and moves. The warmth radiates outward. You sit within range of it. Anne works quietly. Her needle moves steadily. She's comfortable with silence. You appreciate this about her. Susanna reads if there's enough light. Judith might prepare something for the next day. Everyone is occupied but together. In London, You sometimes visit a tavern in the evening, not the same tavern as after a performance, a quieter one. You sit in a corner, you drink ale slowly. You listen to the murmur of other conversations without participating. The quieter taverns attract older patrons. The energy is subdued. People drink and talk, but without the rowdiness of the afternoon taverns. You choose a spot away from the door, away from the fire, somewhere you can observe without being central. The conversations around you are fragments. You hear pieces of stories, bits of arguments and laughter. You are present but separate. Writing can happen in the evening, but it is less common. Your mind is tired from the day. The focus required for writing is harder to summon. If you do write, it is often revision rather than new material. Crossing out a word, adding a phrase, small adjustments. Evening writing is finicky work, correcting errors, smoothing rough lines. It does not require the creative energy of drafting new material. The light is poor for writing. You squint at the page. The letters blur. You work slowly. You might copy a clean version of a heavily revised page. The copying requires attention, but not creativity. It is meditative work. Lamplight or candlelight creates a different atmosphere than daylight. The shadows are deeper. The room feels smaller, more contained. The world outside the circle of light seems distant. This isolation is not uncomfortable. It is simply a fact of evening. The lit space becomes your entire world. What exists beyond the light is irrelevant. The intimacy is focusing. Shadows move as the flame moves. The walls seem to breathe. The effect is hypnotic. You prepare for the next day. You set out clothes. You check that you have paper and ink for writing. You plan your route if you need to go somewhere. These small preparations make mornings easier. Laying out clothes saves time in the morning. You do not have to search or decide. The choices are already made. Checking your supplies prevents frustration. Running out of ink mid-sentence is annoying. Preventing it is simple. Mental preparation is also part of this. You review what tomorrow requires. You set intentions. The planning is light, not burdensome. You think about the work ahead. Not with anxiety, but with awareness. There is a play to finish. There is a rehearsal to attend. There are meetings to hold. The tasks are clear. You do not need to solve them now. You simply acknowledge them. Acknowledging tomorrow's work prevents it from intruding on rest. You have named it. You have noted it. Now you can set it aside. The tasks do not overwhelm you. They are simply what comes next. You have done similar work many times before. Evenings are also when you feel the separation between London and Stratford most acutely. In London, you're alone, or with colleagues. In Stratford, you're with family. Neither is better. They are different. Both are part of your life. The separation creates a kind of doubling. You have two lives, two selves, the London self and the Stratford self. They overlap but are not identical. You miss your family when in London. You miss the work when in Stratford. The longing is mild and manageable. You stretch your body. Writing and sitting leave you stiff. Your back aches. Your shoulders tighten. Standing and moving releases the tension. You roll your shoulders. You flex your fingers. The movement is small but necessary. Your body protests the day's stillness. Joints creak. Muscles are tight. Movement reminds them they can still move. You walk around the room. You touch your toes. You reach overhead. The stretches are simple. The relief is immediate. Your body softens. Blood flows. The discomfort eases. Sometimes you pray. Not long or formal prayers. Just a moment of quiet reflection. You think about the day. You express gratitude for what went well. You ask for strength for what comes next. The practice is private and brief. Prayer is a habit from childhood. The words are familiar. They provide structure for reflection. You do not pray for specific outcomes. You pray for the ability to do your work well, for the health of your family, for peace. The prayer is between you and God. No one else is involved. The intimacy is complete. You hear the sounds of the city or town settling, fewer voices, the occasional call of a night watchman, the creak of a building. These sounds are familiar. They mark the transition to night. The night watchman calls the hour. His voice carries through the quiet streets. The sound is reassuring. Someone is watching. Buildings settle as temperatures drop. Wood contracts. Joints shift. The sounds are gentle and constant. If you're tired, you feel it in the evening. Your eyes are heavy, your thoughts slow. You accept this. There is no point in fighting fatigue. You prepare for sleep instead. Tiredness is a signal. Your body needs rest. You honour the signal rather than pushing through. Fighting fatigue only delays the inevitable. Better to surrender to it and get the rest you need. You might write a letter to a friend, to family, to a business associate. The letter is practical. You share news, ask questions, and convey information. You write clearly and simply. When the letter is finished, you seal it. It will be sent tomorrow. Letters maintain connections across distance. You write to people in Stratford when you're in London. You write to London contacts when you're in Stratford. The letters are brief. You are not verbose in correspondence. You state what needs stating and finish. Sealing the letter with wax makes it official. The seal is a small mark of completion. You tidy the room before bed. You put away papers. You close books. You bank the fire or extinguish the candle. The space is ready for sleep. Order brings calm. Tidying is a transition ritual. It signals the end of the day's activities. The room is reset for tomorrow. Finding things is easier when the room is orderly. Morning you will appreciate, evening use organisation. The act of tidying is calming in itself. The simple motions are meditative. Evenings are not eventful. They are the space between the work of the day and the rest of the night. They allow you to transition. They give you time to settle your mind and body. The transition is necessary. You cannot go directly from work to sleep. The gap allows decompression. Your mind needs time to stop churning. Your body needs time to relax. Evening provides this time. You do not rush through the evening. There is no deadline. You move at your own pace. When you're ready, you go to bed. Until then, you occupy the quiet hours without pressure. The lack of pressure is itself restful. No one expects anything. No one is waiting. You are free to simply be. The evening is yours. It is not dictated by performance schedules or writing deadlines. It is time that belongs to you alone, or to you and your family, or to you and a quiet room. This time is valuable in its simplicity. Owning your time is a luxury. Most people's time belongs to others. In the evening, yours is your own. The simplicity is the value. Nothing complex, nothing demanding. Just time passing gently. You prepare for bed when the evening winds down. You change into a nightshirt. The fabric is worn and soft. You set aside the clothes you wore during the day. They will be there in the morning. The nightshirt is comfortable. It has been washed many times. The fabric is thin but warm enough. Changing clothes signals the final transition. Work clothes come off, sleep clothes go on. The boundary is marked. You fold the day's clothes or hang them on a peg. This small act of care maintains order. The bed is simple. A wooden frame, a mattress stuffed with straw or feathers, blankets, and a coverlet. In winter, you add more blankets. In summer, you use fewer. The bed is not luxurious, but it is adequate. The mattress in London lodgings is usually straw. It rustles when you move. It flattens over time and needs restuffing. The mattress in Stratford is feathers. It is softer and quieter. It shapes to your body more comfortably. Blankets are wool. They are heavy and warm. They smell slightly of lanolin. You lie down. The mattress yields beneath you. Your body relaxes into it. The day's tensions begin to release. Your muscles loosen. Your breathing slows. The horizontal position itself is a relief. Your spine releases. Your muscles do not have to hold you upright. You feel the weight of your body against the mattress. The pressure is grounding. You are supported. Your breathing naturally slows. The rhythm becomes steady. The regularity is soothing. The room is dark. If there is a moon, faint light comes through the window. If not, the darkness is complete. You do not mind. Darkness is restful. Complete darkness is rare in the city. There is always some ambient light, but it is dark enough. Moonlight creates shapes and shadows. You can see the outline of furniture. The effect is soft. Darkness removes visual stimulation. Your eyes can finally rest. They do not have to focus. You hear the sounds of night. In London, there are distant voices, footsteps, and the occasional cart. In Stratford, there is wind, animals, and the creak of the house. These sounds do not disturb you. They are part of the background. London night sounds are human. People moving through the streets, doors closing, voices calling. Stratford night sounds are natural. Wind in trees, an owl calling, a dog barking in the distance. The sounds form a kind of music. They rise and fall, they overlap and separate. They mark time passing. Your thoughts slow. The concerns of the day fade. You do not try to solve problems or plan ahead. You simply let your mind drift. Images and fragments pass through your awareness. They do not form coherent narratives. They are just thoughts dissolving into rest. The mind empties gradually. Thoughts become less frequent, less insistent. Images appear and fade. A face from the day, a line from a play, a memory with no context. The dissolution is pleasant. Conscious thought gives way to something quieter. Sleep comes gradually. You do not notice the exact moment. Your breathing deepens. Your consciousness dims. You slip from waking into sleep without effort. The boundary between waking and sleeping is invisible. You cross it without knowing. Your body knows before your mind. Muscles twitch. Breathing changes rhythm. The transition is smooth. No struggle, no resistance, just a gentle falling away. The night passes. You sleep deeply at first, then more lightly toward morning. You might wake once or twice. You shift position. You adjust the blankets. You fall back asleep quickly. Deep sleep is dreamless, or dreams are not remembered. Your body does its restorative work. Light sleep brings more awareness. You hear sounds. You notice temperature. But you remain mostly asleep. Waking briefly in the night is normal. You register it and return to sleep. It does not disturb the overall rest. Dreams occur, but you do not remember most of them. Occasionally a dream lingers after waking. It is strange or vivid. You think about it briefly, then let it go. Dreams are not significant. They are just the mind working through the day's impressions. Dreams are ephemeral. They fade quickly after waking. Details slip away as you try to hold them. A vivid dream might stay with you through the morning. You puzzle over it. Then it loses its power, and you forget. You don't look for meaning in dreams. They are random firings of a sleeping mind. In winter, the cold wakes you. You pull the blankets tighter. You curl into a smaller shape to conserve warmth. The cold is uncomfortable but not unbearable. You wait for morning. Winter nights are long and dark. The cold is invasive. It finds gaps in the blankets. You pile every available blanket on the bed. Still, your nose and the tips of your ears are cold. Sometimes you get up and add a layer of clothing under the nightshirt. Then you return to bed and sleep better. In summer, warmth can be oppressive. You push the blankets aside, you lie still, trying to catch any breeze. The discomfort passes. You sleep again. Summer nights are short. The heat persists even after dark. The air is still and heavy. You remove blankets until only a sheet remains. You kick that aside too if the heat demands it. Any movement generates warmth. You lie as still as possible. Eventually sleep comes despite the discomfort. Your body rests, muscles repair, your mind processes. Sleep is restorative. You do not think about this consciously, but you feel it when you wake. The rest has done its work. Your body heals itself during sleep. Small injuries mend, strained muscles relax. Your mind sorts and stores the day's experiences. What is important is kept. What is not is discarded. You wake feeling different than you felt when you went to bed. The change is subtle, but real. You're restored. You share a bed with Anne in Stratford. She sleeps on one side and you on the other. You're aware of her presence without it interrupting your rest. The shared warmth is comforting. Two bodies in a bed generate more heat than one. In winter, this is welcome. You know the rhythm of her breathing. The sound is familiar and comforting. Sometimes she wakes when you wake. Sometimes she sleeps through. The companionship exists even in sleep. In London, you sleep alone. The bed is entirely yours. You spread out or curl up as you choose. There is freedom in this, but also a kind of loneliness. You do not dwell on it. Sleeping alone, you can move without consideration. You can sprawl. You can take all the blankets. The freedom is pleasant, but the bed feels larger, emptier. You miss the companionship sometimes. Other times you appreciate the solitude. Both are valid. The quality of sleep varies. Some nights you sleep soundly from dark to dawn. Other nights sleep is broken. You wake repeatedly. You lie awake for stretches. By morning you are less rested. You accept this. Not every night is perfect. Good sleep is a gift. You wake feeling strong and clear. The day ahead seems manageable. Poor sleep leaves you fuzzy. Your thoughts are slower. Your patience is thinner. You do what needs doing anyway. You cannot control the quality of sleep. You can only create conditions that favour it. The rest is beyond your power. Morning comes with light. You wake slowly. You lie still for a moment, orienting yourself. You remember where you are. You think about the day ahead. Then you rise. The first light of dawn is grey and soft. It grows brighter gradually. You hear morning sounds. Birds. People beginning their work. The city or town is waking. You stretch in bed before rising. Your body protests the transition from horizontal to vertical. Then it adjusts. You dress. You step into the day. The night is behind you. Sleep has done what it can. You're ready to begin again. Dressing is automatic. The clothes you laid out are there. You put them on without thought. The day begins. Work waits. People wait. The routine continues. Sleep is not dramatic. It is not an escape or an adventure. It is simply rest. Your body requires it. Your mind requires it. You give yourself over to it each night, trusting that it will restore you. Sleep is fundamental. Without it, nothing else functions properly. You trust sleep. You surrender to it. It has never failed to restore you. The routine of sleep is steady. You go to bed around the same time. You wake around the same time. The consistency helps. Your body knows what to expect. Regularity aids sleep. Your body develops a rhythm. The rhythm supports rest. When travel or work disrupts the rhythm, sleep is harder. You notice the difference. You do not fight sleep. When you're tired, you sleep. When you're rested, you wake. The rhythm is natural. You follow it without resistance. Resistance is futile. The body's need for sleep is non-negotiable. You have learned to listen to your body's signals. When it says sleep, you sleep. When it says wake, you wake. Sleep connects the days. It marks the end of one and the beginning of the next. It provides a pause, a reset. When you wake, you're the same person, but the day is new. Sleep is the boundary between yesterday and today. It separates and connects them. The new day brings new possibilities. The problems of yesterday might look different. The work continues fresh. You're continuous across days, but sleep renews you. Each morning is a small rebirth. Your life is not shaped by grand events. It is shaped by repetition. The same streets walked again and again. The same tasks performed day after day. The same people are seen over and over. This continuity is the foundation of everything. The grand narrative of your life is actually composed of tiny repeated moments. Walking to the theatre, sitting to write, eating bread, sleeping. The repetition creates depth. Each time you walk a street, you know it better. Each time you write, the process is smoother. Continuity is underrated. People seek novelty and drama, but life is built on the ordinary. You write many plays over many years. Each one is created through the same process. Sitting, writing, revising, rehearsing, performing. The process does not change. The plays do. But the work remains constant. By now, you have written dozens of plays. The number is less important than the accumulated practice. Each play is different. Different characters, different conflicts, different language. But the making of them is the same. The constancy of process allows variety of product. Because you know how to make a play, you can make many kinds of plays. You observe the world around you. You see how people speak, how they move, and how they react. These observations accumulate. They become the material of your writing. The process is slow and unconscious. You do not set out to collect material. It simply happens as you live. Every interaction is potential material. Every conversation, every gesture, every conflict. The accumulation is invisible until you need it. Then the material is there, stored without your knowing. Living and writing are not separate. One feeds the other continuously. Your influence grows, but you do not notice it happening. People begin to quote your lines. Your plays are performed more frequently. Your name becomes known. But to you the work is the same. You write, revise, rehearse, and perform. The external recognition does not change the internal routine. Success creeps up slowly. There is no single moment of arrival. You hear your lines quoted in taverns. You see other playwrights imitating your techniques. These are signs, but you do not dwell on them. The work matters more than the recognition. You focus on the work. You maintain your commitments to the theatre company, to your family, to your patrons. These commitments require steady effort. You show up. You do the work. You fulfill your obligations. This reliability is what sustains your career. Reliability is more valuable than brilliance. People depend on you to deliver. You meet deadlines. You honour agreements. You show up when expected. This builds trust. Trust compounds over time. Your reputation is built on consistency. Your legacy is built in moments that are not recorded. The conversation in a tavern that inspires a character. The walk through London that shapes a setting. The quiet hour of revision that turns a weak scene into a strong one. These moments are ordinary. They are also essential. The important moments do not feel important when they happen. They feel like ordinary moments. A stranger's phrase becomes Hamlet's line. A gesture you noticed becomes Lady Macbeth's movement. The legacy is built from invisible pieces. No one knows where the ideas came from. Only you know, and even you forget most of them. You grow older, the work continues. You do not slow down dramatically. You simply keep going. The rhythm of writing and performing does not stop because you age. It continues as long as you are able. Your body ages. Your eyes weaken. Your joints ache. But your mind remains sharp. The work adapts to your changing body. You write less when your hand tires. You rest more. But you do not stop. Age brings perspective. You see patterns you could not see when younger. The work benefits from this. You invest in property. You secure your family's future. These decisions are practical. They are not about glory or fame. They are about ensuring that your wife and children are cared for. The work is necessary and unglamorous. You buy new place, one of the largest houses in Stratford. You buy land. You make investments. These purchases are insurance. If the theatre fails, your family will still have income and shelter. The business of securing a future is tedious. Contracts, negotiations, legal documents. You do it anyway. You return to Stratford more often as you age. The pull of home strengthens. You spend more time with family. You manage your property. You participate in local affairs. The transition from London to Stratford is gradual. It feels natural. London exhausts you more than it used to. The noise, the crowds, the constant activity. Stratford is quieter. The pace is slower. Your family is there. The pull is strong. You do not make a dramatic decision to retire. You simply spend more time at home and less time in London. The transition is organic. The theatre continues without you needing to be there constantly. Other playwrights write. Other actors perform. The company adapts. Your role shifts from central to supportive. You accept this. You have done your part. The company does not need you as much as it once did. This is success, not failure. Younger playwrights bring new energy. You support them. You offer guidance when asked. Stepping back feels right. You have earned rest. The company will continue. You look back on the work with satisfaction, not pride. The plays exist. They are performed. People enjoy them. That is enough. You do not need more than that. Pride would be inappropriate. You did your work. The work succeeded. That is all. Satisfaction is quieter than pride. It is contentment with effort made and tasks completed. The plays will outlast you. This is pleasant to consider, but not essential. You wrote them for now. What happens after is not your concern. Your habits remain. You walk, you write, you read, you sit with others, you eat simple meals, you sleep when tired. These patterns do not change. They are who you are. The habits have carried you through decades. They will carry you to the end. You are comfortable in your routines. They fit you like old clothes. Change is unnecessary. The patterns work. Why alter them? You think about the future rarely. You focus on the present. There is work to do today. There are people to see. There are tasks to complete. The future will arrive when it arrives. You do not rush toward it. The future is abstract. The present is real. Planning too much for the future distracts from living now. You handle what needs handling. You trust the rest to work itself out. Your relationships endure. The people you have known for years are still part of your life. Some have died, others have moved away, but many remain. The continuity of friendship is comforting. Richard Burbage is still acting. Your daughters are grown. Anne is still managing the household. The faces change over time, but some remain constant. These constants anchor you. Long friendships are deep. They require no explanation. The shared history speaks for itself. You do not seek legacy consciously. You do not write to be remembered. You write because it is your work. The plays are created for the present, for the audiences who come to see them now. What happens after is not your concern. Legacy is what others make of your work after you're gone. You have no control over it. You write for the audience in front of you, for the actors, for now. If the plays last, that is pleasant. If they do not, you will not know. Either way, you have done your work. Your life has been steady, not without hardship, but without catastrophe. You have worked, you have rested, you have maintained connections. You have fulfilled responsibilities. Life is ordinary in many ways, but it is also full. Hamlet's death was hard. Financial worries existed, conflicts arose, but overall life has been stable. Stability allowed the work. Without it, you could not have produced so much. Fullness does not require drama. A life of steady work and care is full. The quiet moments matter. The walk through a field, the conversation with a friend, the hour was spent reading, the night was spent sleeping. These are not the moments that make history, but they are the moments that make a life. History records the extraordinary. Life is built from the ordinary. The small moments accumulate. Together, they are everything. You will not be remembered for walking through a field, but the walking shaped who you were. It shaped what you wrote. You have observed much. You have written much. You have lived a life of attention and care. The work reflects this. The characters feel real because they are drawn from real observation. The language feels alive because it comes from a mind that has listened carefully. Attention is the foundation of good writing. You have paid attention for decades. The care you take shows in the work, the precision, the nuance, the humanity. The life and the work are inseparable. The work grew from the life. The life was shaped by the work. You continue. Day follows day. Work follows rest. Seasons turn. You remain engaged with the world around you. You notice. You remember. You create. The pattern continues. It will continue until it cannot. Engagement is the key. You remain interested, curious, attentive. As long as you engage, you are alive in the way that matters most. Life is not extraordinary. It is simply lived with consistency and purpose. This is enough. This has always been enough. Extraordinary lives are rare and often tragic. Ordinary lives are common and often rich. You have lived consistently. You have lived with purpose. These are achievements. Enough is enough. You do not need to be more than you are. When the day ends, you prepare for sleep. You settle into bed. You let go of the day's concerns. Tomorrow will come. There will be more work, more walking, and more observations. But for now, you rest. The day ends. The night comes. Sleep arrives. Tomorrow is another day. The pattern will repeat. For now, you rest. The work is done. The day is complete. The rhythm continues. The life continues. The work continues. This is how it has always been. This is how it will remain. Continuity is the deepest truth. Everything changes slowly within an unchanging pattern. The rhythm is reliable. You trust it. It has carried you this far. It will carry you to the end. And beyond the end, the work will continue in other hands, other voices, other times. But that is not your concern. Your concern is now, this day, this moment, this breath. And so you rest. And so the world continues. And so the story goes on. Welcome into a little history journey through more than 1,000 years of English history, told not through battles and bloodshed, but through the quiet evolution of power itself. Tonight, we'll follow the crown from shadowy Saxon halls to modern ceremonial splendour, watching how authority transformed from something seized by force into something inherited, then shared, and finally reimagined. Settle in as we trace the long winding path of England's monarchy, a story less about individual rulers than about how a nation slowly learned to govern itself. Now imagine, if you would like, you're standing in a drafty hall somewhere in 10th century England, and the word king doesn't mean what you think it means. Not yet. The man sitting in the carved chair at the far end isn't wearing a crown. Those are rare, expensive things saved for special occasions. He's wearing wool, probably dyed an expensive purple or deep blue, and he's surrounded by armed men who look more like business partners than subjects. Because that's essentially what they are. The early English kings, those Saxon rulers whose names run together in a blur of Ethels and Edgars, weren't absolute monarchs in any meaningful sense. They were more like chief executives of a very unstable company, where the board of directors carried swords and owned their own private armies. When these kings travelled through their realm, which they did constantly, they weren't touring for pleasure. They were collecting what was owed to them, settling disputes, and most importantly, reminding everyone that they existed. Picture one of these royal journeys in detail. The king and his household, maybe 50 people, maybe 200, arrive at a nobleman's estate as the sun sets, their horses muddy from travelling unpaved roads. The nobleman has been preparing for weeks, slaughtering livestock, brewing ale, and baking bread in outdoor ovens that filled his yard with smoke and the smell of yeast. He is not being hospitable out of pure generosity. This is a tax, paid in roasted meat and feather beds and barrels of drink that took months to accumulate. The king will eat, hold court in the nobleman's main hall, resolve whatever local squabbles need royal attention, and move on within a few days. If he stayed in one place too long, he'd eat his host into poverty, consuming stores meant to last the winter. These early monarchs ruled through a combination of personal charisma, strategic marriages, and the ability to reward loyalty with land. When a king died, succession wasn't automatic in any formal sense. The dead king's son might inherit, but only if he could convince enough powerful men that he deserved to. Sometimes the crown went to a brother, an uncle, or a nephew, whoever seemed most likely to keep the kingdom from fragmenting into chaos, and whoever could gather the most support from the nobles who actually controlled military force. The kingdom itself was barely a coherent thing. England in 900 or 1000 Anno Domini was more like a collection of neighbourhoods that happened to share a language and some cultural habits. Different regions had different laws, different customs, and different ideas about what constituted justice. In Northumbria, blood feuds were settled one way. In Kent, another way entirely. In Wessex, yet another. The king's job wasn't to impose uniformity. He lacked the resources and authority for that. But to be respected enough that people accepted his judgments when conflicts arose between these different regional traditions. Consider the problem of law enforcement in this era. There were no police, no permanent courts, and no system for catching criminals beyond community effort and collective memory. If someone stole your cow, you gathered your relatives and went looking for justice yourself, tracking the thief to his village and demanding restitution. The king's role was to provide a framework, a set of customs and expectations that kept these personal disputes from escalating into private wars that could destabilize entire regions. His authority was real, but it was also fragile, dependent on everyone agreeing to play by roughly the same rules. The irony is that these weak travelling kings created something surprisingly durable. By moving constantly, by inserting themselves into local affairs, and by maintaining personal relationships with dozens of important families across the kingdom, they wove together a network that would eventually become a nation. They were like gardeners tending a sprawling vineyard, training the vines to grow in roughly the same direction without quite controlling where each individual branch would go. The physical reality of Saxon kingship was humble by later standards. The royal halls were timber structures, impressive in their day but ultimately temporary. The largest might be 100 feet long, with carved posts supporting a high roof, tapestries on the walls to block drafts, and a central hearth that filled the space with smoke that eventually found its way out through gaps in the thatch. These weren't palaces, they were well-built barns where important business happened. The king sat on a raised platform at one end, his closest advisors nearby, while lesser nobles and warriors filled the benches along the walls. Justice in these halls was personal and immediate. A man with a grievance would approach the king directly, state his case, and wait for judgment. The king might consult with his advisors, might ask questions, and might demand that the accuser and accused both swear oaths on holy relics. The process was public, visible to everyone present, which served as a kind of quality control. If the king's judgment seemed arbitrary or unfair, word would spread, and his authority would diminish. Reputation was everything when you couldn't enforce decisions with a standing army. Everything changed when the Normans arrived in 1066, though perhaps not in the way you've been taught. William the Conqueror didn't transform England overnight through military brilliance alone. What he did was introduce a technology that would reshape the landscape and, more importantly, the psychology of power, the castle. You're standing outside the newly built stone keep at the Tower of London. It's around 1090, and this fortress is the most imposing structure most Londoners have ever seen. The white limestone walls rise 90 feet into the air, thick enough that you could drive a cart through them if they were hollow, which they're not. These walls are solid stone, quarried in Normandy and shipped across the Channel at enormous expense, then hauled from the riverbank and assembled by craftsmen who'd spent their lives learning how to stack rocks so they wouldn't fall down. These walls say something very clear. The people inside cannot be removed by force. Before the Normans, English nobles lived in wooden halls, impressive but ultimately burnable. A determined enemy with enough men and enough torches could destroy any seat of power given enough time and determination. But castles, these massive stone declarations of permanence, changed the equation entirely. Now a relatively small force could hold out against a much larger army almost indefinitely, as long as supplies lasted. Power became something you could lock inside walls, something that could endure siege after siege. William and his Norman followers built castles everywhere, creating a physical network of control points across the country. Within 20 years of the conquest, major castles stood in every significant town and at strategic points throughout the countryside. These weren't just military installations. They were statements about the nature of authority itself. The king might still travel, but now he had permanent bases, places he could leave trusted men to hold in his absence. England's governance began to settle down, to root itself in specific locations rather than existing solely in the person of the travelling king. The relationship between king and nobles shifted accordingly. Norman nobles held their lands directly from the king in exchange for military service, a formal arrangement called feudalism, though the reality was messier than the theory. A baron with a strong castle and loyal knights could afford to be somewhat independent and could negotiate from a position of strength. Kings learned to balance the need for powerful defenders against the danger of overly powerful subjects who might decide they'd make better kings themselves. You can see this tension play out in the anarchy of the 1100s, when Stephen and Matilda both claimed the crown, and England descended into 19 years of civil war. What made this conflict so devastating wasn't just the fighting, it was that individual barons could choose sides, switch sides, or simply declare their own mini-kingdoms, and their castles made them nearly untouchable. A baron who'd built a strong fortress could withstand royal displeasure, could ignore commands, and could effectively govern his region as an independent principality. The war only ended when both sides were exhausted and willing to compromise on succession, with Stephen keeping the crown for his lifetime but agreeing that Matilda's son Henry would succeed him. The castles themselves evolved over time. Early Norman fortresses were practical and brutal. Stone boxes designed to intimidate and endure. They had minimal windows, thick walls, and simple layouts focused entirely on defence. By the 1200s they'd become more sophisticated, with concentric walls, flanking towers that allowed defenders to shoot along the walls, elaborate gates with multiple layers of defence, and murder holes through which boiling water or oil could be poured on attackers. They were still about power, but now they were also about displaying that power, about creating visual symbols of royal authority that could be read from miles away. Inside these castles, a new kind of government was developing. Kings couldn't be everywhere at once, so they created bureaucracies, permanent staffs of clerks and administrators who could collect taxes, maintain records and issue commands in the king's name. The Exchequer, England's tax collection system, got its name from the checkered cloth used to count money, like a medieval spreadsheet. Coins were stacked on the squares, making it easy to calculate totals and detect discrepancies. These administrators weren't particularly democratic, but they were relatively consistent, which was something new and valuable in medieval governance. The development of written records changed everything. Instead of relying on memory and oral tradition, the government began documenting land ownership, tax obligations, legal decisions, and royal commands. The Domesday Book, compiled in 1086, was an extraordinary achievement, a complete survey of England's land and resources, created so William would know exactly what he'd conquered and what taxes he could extract from it. Later kings built on this foundation, creating archives that grew larger each year, accumulating knowledge and precedent. The Castle Age taught England's rulers an important lesson. You could project power without being physically present. A castle with a royal coat of arms, staffed by royal officials, represented the king even when he was 200 miles away. This abstraction of authority, the idea that kingship was bigger than the individual king, would turn out to be crucial to the institution's long-term survival. By the late 1100s, something unexpected was happening. Law was becoming more important than the sword, or at least competitive with it, not because anyone believed in democracy or human rights. Those concepts were centuries away, but because kings discovered that consistent legal systems made them stronger and more capable of controlling their kingdoms effectively. You're in Westminster Hall in 1190, watching as royal judges hear cases. These aren't local disputes about stolen chickens anymore, though those still get settled at lower levels. These are questions about land ownership, inheritance rights, commercial contracts, and conflicts between powerful nobles who need neutral arbitration. The judges are using precedent, previous royal decisions to guide their rulings. They're creating what will eventually be called common law, a system of justice that applies across the entire kingdom regardless of local custom. Henry II deserves much of the credit or blame depending on how you feel about organised government. He was obsessed with law, not because he was particularly just or fair-minded, but because legal authority was more efficient than military conquest. He couldn't be everywhere at once and couldn't personally resolve every dispute, but he could create a system that resolved disputes in his name. He expanded royal courts, standardised procedures, and introduced the jury system, not as a democratic institution, but as a practical way to determine facts. 12 local men were more likely to know who actually owned that disputed field than some travelling judge who'd just arrived from London. The genius of common law was that it accumulated. Each decision added to the body of legal knowledge, creating a growing framework of expectations and precedents. Nobles might have castles and armies, but if the law said they owed the king certain rights or revenues, increasingly they had to comply. Legal obligation became as binding as iron chains, and unlike chains, you couldn't break it with a sword without consequences that extended beyond the immediate conflict. This legal evolution created unexpected consequences. Once you establish that disputes should be settled by precedent and procedure rather than force, you've created a space where the king himself can be challenged. Not overthrown, that still required armies, but constrained, held to account, and forced to justify his actions according to established standards. The barons who forced King John to sign Magna Carta in 1215 weren't revolutionaries trying to overthrow the monarchy. They were conservatives who believed the king was breaking established customs and wanted those customs written down and enforced. Magna Carta itself was mostly concerned with feudal technicalities that seem obscure today. How much money the king could demand when a baron died, whether he could marry off heiresses to his friends without family consent, what rights applied to forests and who could hunt in them. But buried in the practical details was a revolutionary idea. The king was subject to law, not above it, not exempt from it, subject to it, just like his nobles and subjects. John, of course, immediately tried to ignore Magna Carta, and England descended into yet another civil war. But the document survived, copied and recopied, cited in later disputes, gradually transforming from a specific peace treaty into a general statement of principles. By the 1300s, English lawyers could point to Magna Carta and say with confidence that certain things were simply not allowed, even for kings. The document became a touchstone, a reference point, and a limit on royal power that couldn't be entirely ignored. The legal system also changed how England was governed day to day in practical terms. Royal justices travelled circuits, hearing cases in every county on a regular schedule. Sheriffs, originally just local strongmen loyal to the king, became official administrators responsible for executing court orders, collecting taxes and maintaining order. The whole apparatus of government became more predictable, more bureaucratic and more impersonal. You might never see the king, but you definitely encounter his legal system at some point in your life. This legal framework didn't make England peaceful or just by modern standards. Trial by combat was still a legitimate way to settle certain disputes until the 1300s, based on the belief that God would ensure the righteous party won the fight. Torture was used to extract confessions from accused criminals. Poor people had far fewer legal protections than the wealthy, and often couldn't afford to bring cases to royal courts. But the system established something crucial: the expectation that power should operate through rules rather than pure force. The development of legal education formalised these changes. By the 1200s, aspiring lawyers studied at the Inns of Court in London, learning procedures, studying precedents, and forming professional networks. These lawyers became a new kind of elite. Not warriors or clergy, but specialists in navigating the increasingly complex legal system. They advised nobles, represented clients in court, drafted documents, and generally served as intermediaries between royal authority and local reality. Nobody set out to invent Parliament. It emerged gradually, yet almost accidentally, from the practical problem of how to govern a complex kingdom without modern communication technology. The story of Parliament isn't a story of democracy, that comes much later, but of kings discovering that consulting with their subjects made certain tasks much easier and more effective. You're sitting in Westminster in 1295 attending what would later be called the Model Parliament. You're not here because you're important. You're here because you represent a borough, a town that the king needs money from. Around you are lords, bishops, and knights from every county, maybe 300 men total, gathered in a large hall that echoes with conversation and the shuffling of feet. The king hasn't gathered you to ask your opinion exactly. He's gathered you to explain why he needs another tax and to get your agreement to collect it from your communities. This is the birth of representative government, though nobody uses those words. The king needs money for wars in France and Scotland. He can't just take it. The legal system that makes his authority legitimate also constrains his ability to seize property arbitrarily. So he summons representatives from across the kingdom, explains his needs through his ministers, and asks them to convince their communities to pay up. In exchange, these representatives get to air grievances, suggest improvements, and occasionally negotiate the terms of taxation. The genius of this system is that it distributes responsibility. When taxes are raised, they're not imposed by royal decree alone. The kingdom's representatives have agreed to them, or at least appeared to agree in a public forum. This makes collection easier and rebellion less likely. It also creates a forum where different regions and interest groups can communicate with each other and with the royal government, building networks that transcend purely local interests. Parliament in the 1300s looks nothing like a modern legislature. Sessions are infrequent and brief, sometimes lasting only a few days. The king calls Parliament when he needs something, not on any regular schedule. The representatives have no permanent meeting place, no staff, and no real institutional memory beyond what individual members carry with them. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, Parliament becomes a fixture of English government, something kings summon as a matter of course rather than as an emergency measure. The crucial moment comes during the 100 Years' War, when English kings need enormous sums to fight in France. Parliament discovers it has leverage. Want money for the war? Then address these petitions first. Fix this problem with forest law. Dismiss this unpopular minister. Investigate these financial irregularities. The negotiations are always polite, always framed as helpful advice to the king, but the underlying message is clear. Consultation is becoming expected, not optional. By the 1400s, Parliament had split into two houses: the Lords, representing the great nobles and bishops, and the Commons, representing everybody else who mattered politically, which was still a tiny fraction of the population. This division reflects the reality of English society: a small elite with enormous power and wealth, and a larger group of moderately prosperous men who collectively have their own kind of influence through control of local governance and economic resources. What's fascinating is how this system preserved itself through periods of strong kingship. Even powerful monarchs found it easier to work with Parliament than against it. Henry V, victorious at Agincourt and the most successful warrior king England ever produced, still summoned Parliament regularly. Not because he was weak, he commanded the most formidable military force in Western Europe, but because Parliament was useful. It provided intelligence about conditions across the kingdom, legitimised royal policies, helped maintain order when the king was abroad, and generally made governance smoother. The Wars of the Roses in the late 1400s tested Parliament's durability. For 30 years, two branches of the royal family fought for the crown, and England saw 5 different kings as the throne changed hands through battle, betrayal, and murder. Through all this chaos, Parliament continued to meet, to grant taxes, and to pass laws. It had become part of the furniture of the English government, something that persisted regardless of who sat on the throne or how they got there. Parliament's power grew through precedent and practice rather than dramatic confrontation. Each time a king asked for money, Parliament gained a little more leverage. Each time representatives voiced grievances, they established the expectation that grievances should be heard. Each time a session ended with some compromise between royal needs and subjects' concerns, the habit of consultation became more ingrained. By 1500, no English king would dream of raising significant taxes without Parliament's consent, not because of any written rule, but because the practice was so established that violating it seemed dangerous. Henry VII seized the throne in 1485 after winning a battle, which was not an unusual way to become king in 15th century England. What was unusual was how he and his descendants transformed that throne into something approaching modern state power. The Tudors didn't invent royal authority, but they perfected it, creating an administrative machine that could reach into every corner of the kingdom with unprecedented effectiveness. You're watching Henry VIII's government at work in the 1530s, and it's impressive in a terrifying sort of way. The king has ministers who oversee every aspect of national life, collecting taxes, enforcing religious conformity, managing foreign relations, administering justice, controlling what gets published, and even regulating trade and prices. Thomas Cromwell, the king's chief minister, has created a bureaucracy that generates mountains of paperwork. Every transaction, every appointment, and every legal decision gets recorded, filed, cross-referenced, and stored in growing archives. The government knows things about the kingdom that previous governments could never have known. This administrative revolution had practical roots. The Tudors were always short of money. War was expensive. Maintaining a royal court was expensive, and projecting power internationally was expensive. An efficient tax collection required detailed knowledge of who owned what and how much they could pay. Religious upheaval, Henry VIII's break with Rome, Edward VI's Protestantism, Mary's Catholicism, and Elizabeth's compromise, required monitoring people's beliefs and behaviours in ways earlier governments never attempted. Foreign threats from Spain and France demanded better military organisation and intelligence gathering. The machinery of Tudor government reached deeper into daily life than anything previous rulers had managed. You couldn't print a book without approval from royal censors who checked for heresy or sedition. You couldn't legally marry without following specific procedures that the church, now controlled by the crown, had established. Your local church, which for 1,000 years had been part of an international Catholic organisation, was now a branch of the English government, with the monarch as its supreme head. Parish priests read royal proclamations from their pulpits, reported suspicious behaviour to authorities, and served as the government's eyes and ears in every community. Yet even the powerful Tudors couldn't rule alone. Henry VIII used Parliament extensively, particularly when he needed legal cover for radical changes like breaking with Rome or dissolving monasteries and seizing their wealth. He understood that controversial policies worked better when Parliament had endorsed them, giving the changes legitimacy beyond mere royal command. Elizabeth I summoned Parliament 13 times during her 45-year reign, always managing to extract the money she needed while keeping her independence and avoiding commitments that would limit her freedom of action. The Tudors understood that royal authority worked better when it operated through established institutions rather than against them. They expanded the Privy Council, a small group of advisers who met regularly to coordinate government policy. They strengthened the Court of Star Chamber, which dealt with powerful offenders who might intimidate local courts. They reformed the administration of justice, making royal courts more accessible and more consistent. All of these changes increased royal power, but they did so by building institutions that would outlast individual monarchs. What made the Tudor government work was the illusion of accessibility combined with the reality of control. Elizabeth cultivated an image of herself as accessible to her subjects, going on royal progresses through the countryside each summer, appearing at public events, and even occasionally speaking to crowds. Common people could submit petitions to her, could catch her attention during public appearances, and could feel that they had some connection to royal authority. But actual power was concentrated in a small group of ministers and councillors who managed everything behind the scenes. The Queen made final decisions, but those decisions were based on information filtered and shaped by her administrators, who controlled what she saw and heard. The Tudor period also saw the final transformation of the nobility from independent power centres into court attendants. A medieval baron with his own castle and private army was a potential threat, someone who could rebel if sufficiently provoked. A Tudor courtier dependent on royal favour for wealth and position was a servant, however exalted his title. The great nobles still had titles and lands and still commanded respect, but they spent their time competing for the monarch's attention at court rather than raising armies in their home counties. This centralisation had limits. The Tudors never created anything like a police force. Local government still depended on unpaid justices of the peace, local gentlemen who enforced laws and settled disputes in their communities as a civic duty. The Crown could issue orders from London, but it depended on local cooperation to carry them out. When Elizabeth's government tried to impose unpopular policies, They often simply didn't get enforced. Nobody rebelled. They just quietly ignored instructions and waited for the crown to lose interest or move on to other concerns. The religious settlement under Elizabeth demonstrated both the power and limits of Tudor authority. She wanted a moderate Protestant church that most people could accept. She got laws establishing this church, but she couldn't force genuine belief. Catholics practiced their faith secretly. Radical Protestants pushed for further reforms. Elizabeth's government prosecuted the most obvious offenders, but it couldn't police everyone's private beliefs. The settlement worked because most people went along with it publicly, regardless of what they believed privately. The Stuart kings who followed Elizabeth made a critical mistake. They believed their own propaganda about divine right monarchy. James I and his son Charles I thought kings answered only to God, not to Parliament or law or custom. Unfortunately for them, they lived in England, where Parliament and law and custom had been accumulating power for 4 centuries, and weren't about to surrender that power without a fight. You're watching the House of Commons in 1642, and the atmosphere is electric with tension. Parliament has been battling Charles I for years over money, religion and power. The king keeps trying to rule without Parliament, imposing taxes by royal decree, imprisoning critics without trial, and enforcing religious uniformity through courts that bypass common law. Parliament keeps insisting on its traditional rights and privileges, control over taxation, protection from arbitrary arrest, and religious reform. Neither side will compromise, and the kingdom is sliding inexorably towards civil war. What follows is genuinely revolutionary, though the revolutionaries themselves don't see it that way initially. Parliament raises an army against the king, claiming they're defending English liberties against tyranny. They fight a civil war that lasts from 1642 to 1646, with battles at Edgehill, Marston Moor and Naseby that kill thousands. Parliament wins, captures the king, tries to negotiate, fails, and then faces a terrible question. What do you do with a king who won't accept limits on his power? The answer, reached after agonising debate, is to put him on trial. In 1649, Charles I stands before a specially created court and hears himself accused of treason against his own kingdom. He refuses to recognise the court's authority, refuses to plead, and insists that kings are accountable only to God. The court finds him guilty anyway and sentences him to death. On a cold January morning, Charles steps through a window of the banqueting house in Whitehall onto a scaffold, says a few words to the crowd, and places his head on the block. For the first time in English history, the people, or at least the armed representatives of some of the people, have formally rejected the principle that kings are above law. The republic that follows, led by Oliver Cromwell, is short-lived and unpopular. Turns out that military dictatorship is even less appealing than monarchy, especially when the dictator closes theatres, bans Christmas celebrations, prohibits dancing and most forms of entertainment, and generally tries to enforce Puritan morality on an unwilling population. Cromwell rules effectively enough. He conquers Ireland and Scotland, wins a war with the Dutch, and makes England feared abroad. But he can't create legitimate institutions to replace the ones he destroyed. When Cromwell dies in 1658, his son briefly takes over, fails to command military loyalty, and within 2 years England has invited Charles II, son of the executed king, to return from exile and take the throne. But the crown that Charles II receives is fundamentally different from the one his father lost. Everyone understands now that monarchs rule with Parliament's consent, not by divine right alone. Charles is careful not to push too hard, accepting Parliament's authority over taxation, avoiding controversial religious policies, and generally trying to keep everyone happy. The balance of power has shifted permanently, even if nobody wants to admit it too explicitly. Kings can still make decisions, appoint ministers, and conduct foreign policy, but they need Parliament's cooperation for money and legitimacy. James II, who succeeded his brother in 1685, either didn't understand this or didn't care. He was Catholic in a Protestant kingdom, authoritarian in a country that had learned to resist authoritarianism, and absolutely convinced of his divine right to rule however he pleased. He appointed Catholics to military commands and university positions, suspended laws against Catholic worship, and generally behaved as if Parliament didn't exist. Within 3 years, the political class had had enough. He invited his Protestant daughter Mary and her Dutch husband William to invade England, save Protestantism, and restore constitutional government. This glorious revolution, as it came to be called, was actually more significant than the Civil War, despite being less violent. Nobody was executed. There was minimal fighting. James simply fled to France when he realised he had no support, allegedly throwing the Great Seal of England into the Thames as he escaped. Parliament then invited William and Mary to become joint monarchs, but only after they agreed to specific conditions laid out in writing. The Bill of Rights in 1689 formally established that Parliament controlled taxation, that elections should be free, and that monarchs couldn't suspend laws or maintain standing armies in peacetime without parliamentary consent. The message was unmistakable. The Crown served at Parliament's pleasure. Kings and queens could still be influential, could still shape policy, and could still command respect and loyalty, but ultimate authority rested with the political nation represented in Parliament. The monarch's role was increasingly ceremonial and symbolic, though it would take another century for this to become fully clear to everyone involved. By the 1700s, England, now officially Great Britain after the union with Scotland in 1707, had developed something unique in Europe, a constitutional monarchy where Parliament held real power, but the Crown remained central to political legitimacy. It was a strange hybrid that worked better in practice than in theory, and it would serve as a model for other nations trying to balance traditional authority with representative government. You're observing the government of Robert Walpole in the 1730s, and you'd be forgiven for being confused about who's actually in charge. Technically, King George I is the monarch, the source of all legitimate authority, and the person in whose name laws are passed and wars are fought. But George barely speaks English, having grown up in Germany, and he's not particularly interested in British politics beyond ensuring he receives his income and isn't bothered with details. Real power rests with Walpole, who serves as First Lord of the Treasury and manages the House of Commons through a combination of patronage, persuasion, and careful coalition building. This is the birth of the Prime Minister, though that title isn't official yet, and Walpole would deny he holds any such position. What he's done is demonstrate that it's possible to run the government while the monarch does something else entirely. George I attends cabinet meetings early in his reign, then stops bothering when it becomes clear the discussions are conducted in English and deal with matters he doesn't understand or care about. His son George II is more engaged, but still largely leaves policy to his ministers, intervening occasionally on matters he cares about, but accepting that day-to-day governance is beyond his interest or expertise. The arrangement works because it satisfies everyone's needs. The monarchy provides continuity, symbolism and legitimacy without having to make difficult day-to-day decisions that might prove unpopular. Parliament gets to control policy and taxation. Ministers can govern effectively without worrying about royal interference or having to explain every detail to someone who might not understand the context. And the public, or at least the small fraction of the public who can vote, has representatives who theoretically speak for them and protect their interests. George III, who came to the throne in 1760, tried to reassert royal influence, appointing ministers based on personal preference rather than parliamentary support. This created constitutional crises and political chaos, with governments falling every few months as the king and parliament battled for control. It contributed to the loss of the American colonies, who rebelled partly because they objected to what they saw as tyrannical royal power unchecked by representative government. The American Revolution taught Britain an important lesson. Trying to govern without consent of the governed, even in the limited 18th century sense of governed, didn't work and could lead to catastrophic losses. By the early 1800s, the pattern was set. Monarchs could have opinions, could try to influence policy, and could select ministers they liked, but they couldn't govern against Parliament's wishes for any extended period. When William IV tried to dismiss a popular government in 1834, appointing ministers of his own choosing, the new government simply lost the next election badly. The king had to accept back the ministers he dismissed, and from that point forward no monarch seriously attempted to govern against parliamentary majorities. The Reform Act of 1832 expanded the franchise and redistributed parliamentary seats, making the House of Commons more representative of urban, industrial Britain, rather than rural estates controlled by aristocrats. This further reduced royal influence because Parliament now represented broader interests that the Crown couldn't control through traditional patronage. Democracy was still limited. Only about 1 in 5 adult men could vote, and women were entirely excluded. But the direction of change was clear. Power was flowing steadily toward elected representatives and away from hereditary authorities. Victoria, who became Queen in 1837 at age 18, had strong opinions about politics, and wasn't shy about expressing them to her ministers. She loved some prime ministers, particularly the charming conservative Benjamin Disraeli, and thoroughly disliked others, especially the liberal William Gladstone. But she understood the constitutional reality. She could advise, encourage, and warn, but she couldn't actually make policy. When her beloved husband, Albert, died in 1861, she withdrew from public life for years, dressed in black mourning clothes for the rest of her life, and the government continued to function perfectly well without her active participation. This proves something important. The monarchy was no longer essential to day-to-day governance. The development of political parties formalised the separation of Crown and government. By the mid-1800s, 2 organised parties, Whigs and Tories, later Liberals and Conservatives, competed for control of Parliament. The Queen's role in selecting a Prime Minister became purely ceremonial. She appointed whoever commanded majority support in the Commons. If an election produced a clear winner, she had no choice. If the result was ambiguous, she might exercise judgment, but always within narrow bounds defined by parliamentary arithmetic. The British Empire complicated this constitutional evolution. Victoria was proclaimed Empress of India in 1876, ruling over millions of subjects who had no vote, no representation, and no say in how they were governed. The monarchy served different functions in different parts of the empire: constitutional and limited in Britain, imperial and authoritarian in India. This contradiction would eventually contribute to the empire's dissolution, but in the short term it gave the monarchy renewed importance as a symbol of imperial unity. By the late 1800s, the British monarchy had completed its transformation from a source of political power to a symbol of national continuity. This might sound like a demotion, but it turned out to be crucial for the institution's survival. Monarchs who no longer made controversial political decisions couldn't be blamed for policy failures, couldn't alienate half the population, and couldn't become targets for revolution the way kings elsewhere in Europe were. You're watching Victoria's Diamond Jubilee in 1897, celebrating 60 years on the throne. The entire British Empire has sent representatives. The parade includes soldiers from India in turbans, Canadian mounties, Australian cavalry, and African colonial troops, all parts of a global empire that Victoria theoretically rules, but never actually governs in any practical sense. She's an elderly woman in a black widow's weeds, frail enough that she can't climb the steps of St. Paul's Cathedral, and has to receive a blessing while sitting in her carriage. Yet she's become something like the grandmother of the nation, respected and beloved precisely because she doesn't interfere with how the country is actually run. This symbolic role proved surprisingly powerful. The monarch could embody national unity above political parties, could provide continuity through changing governments, and could represent Britain to the world in ways that elected officials couldn't. When Edward VII succeeded Victoria in 1901, he became Britain's diplomatic face in Europe, using family connections. He was related to half the crowned heads of Europe, to smooth international relations and conduct informal diplomacy. He had no power to make treaties or declare war, but his conversations with foreign monarchs helped ease tensions and build relationships. The First World War tested the monarchy's symbolic importance. George V, Edward's son, couldn't prevent the war, couldn't direct military strategy, and couldn't make peace. Those decisions belonged to elected officials and military commanders, but he could visit troops at the front, tour munitions factories, appear at public events to boost morale, and provide a focal point for national solidarity. He changed the royal family's German surname, Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, to the English-sounding Windsor, symbolically aligning the monarchy with British nationalism against German enemies. When revolution swept away the German, Austrian and Russian monarchies during and after the war, Britain survived partly because it had already accepted constitutional limits. The Tsar of Russia was an absolute monarch who bore direct responsibility for military defeats and political failures. Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany had real power over military appointments and strategy. When things went badly, their thrones went with them. George V, who had no such power, couldn't be blamed for the war's hardships. The monarchy became a source of stability during chaos, rather than a target for revolutionary anger. The interwar years brought new challenges. George V had to manage the political crisis when his government divided over economic policy in 1931. His role was purely procedural, ensuring that a government could be formed and that constitutional processes continued. But even this limited function was essential. Without the Crown as a neutral arbiter, Britain might have faced a constitutional collapse like those affecting other European nations. The abdication crisis of 1936 revealed how thoroughly the monarchy had become a constitutional institution. Edward VIII wanted to marry Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee. The government objected, not because they had any particular authority over the king's personal life, but because the scandal would damage the monarchy's symbolic role at a time when European democracy was under threat from fascism. Edward could have fought, could have tried to assert royal independence, and could have appealed to public opinion. But he understood the reality. A modern constitutional monarch couldn't rule against his government's advice. He abdicated after less than a year, and his brother George VI became king. George VI, shy and suffering from a stammer that made public speaking torture, seemed like an unlikely symbol of British resistance to Nazi Germany. But during the Second World War, he and his wife, Elizabeth, refused to leave London during the Blitz, visited bombed neighbourhoods still smoking from night raids, and generally embodied the idea that Britain would endure whatever Hitler threw at it. They had no military authority, no power to make strategic decisions, and no control over resources. But their presence mattered in ways that purely practical leadership couldn't achieve. When Buckingham Palace was bombed, the Queen famously said she was glad because now she could look the East End in the face. Her home had suffered like theirs. The war cemented the monarchy's modern role. The royal family became a symbol of national resistance and unity, appearing on propaganda posters, in newsreels, and at public events. But they exercised no actual power. Churchill made the strategic decisions, Parliament voted the money, and military commanders directed the fighting. The Crown's contribution was entirely symbolic, but symbols matter, especially during existential struggles. Elizabeth II became Queen in 1952 and reigned for 70 years, presiding over the complete transformation of Britain and its relationship with the world. Her reign demonstrated both the durability and the limitations of constitutional monarchy in an age of democracy, mass media, and rapidly changing social values. You're observing the Queen's role in government, and it's both more and less than you might expect. She meets with the Prime Minister every week when they're both in London. A private meeting without staff where the Prime Minister briefs her on government business, and she offers whatever advice her decades of experience suggest. She receives government papers in red boxes, reads them carefully, and is kept informed of all major decisions before they are announced publicly. She can offer advice based on having worked with 14 Prime Ministers, from Churchill to Truss, but she makes no policy, commands no armies, and controls no budgets. When she delivers the Queen's speech at the opening of Parliament, she's reading words written by the government, outlining plans she may or may not personally support. This complete separation of symbolic authority from actual power turned out to be the monarchy's salvation. When governments made unpopular decisions, entering wars, cutting services, raising taxes, implementing controversial social policies, the Crown couldn't be blamed. When political parties battled each other with increasing viciousness, the monarch remained above the fray, a neutral presence that belonged to everyone. The Queen met with Prime Ministers from across the political spectrum, from the Conservative Churchill to the Labour Wilson to the Conservative Thatcher, to the Labour Blair to the Conservative Johnson, and maintained cordial working relationships. with all of them regardless of her personal views, which she kept scrupulously private. The monarchy's role became largely ceremonial and cultural. State occasions, coronations, jubilees, royal weddings, and state funerals provided spectacle and tradition that connected modern Britain to its past. The ceremonies hadn't changed much in centuries. The same crown jewels were used, the same oaths sworn, and the same rituals performed. This continuity gave many people a sense of stability in a rapidly changing world, a feeling that something endured while everything else transformed. The royal family became, for better or worse, celebrities whose personal lives generated endless public interest and media coverage. This wasn't what medieval kings would recognise as power, but it was a form of cultural influence that proved remarkably resilient. Royal weddings drew millions of viewers. Royal scandals filled tabloid headlines for months. The births of royal babies were announced with traditional cannon salutes and modern social media posts. The monarchy had become entertainment and tradition simultaneously. The relationship between crown and democracy resolved itself into a stable arrangement that satisfied most people most of the time. Parliament, elected by universal adult suffrage from 1928 onward, held absolute legal authority. The Prime Minister and Cabinet made all actual decisions about policy, spending, war and peace. But the monarch provided continuity that elected officials couldn't, symbolising the nation itself rather than any particular party or government. When elections produced new governments, the transition was smooth because the crown remained constant. The incoming Prime Minister went to the palace, kissed hands in an ancient ceremony, and became head of government while the monarch remained head of state. Elizabeth's long reign saw the British Empire dissolve into a commonwealth of independent nations. She remained queen of some of these nations, Canada, Australia and New Zealand among others, but only because they chose to keep her, not because Britain could force them. Other former colonies became republics and left the Commonwealth entirely or stayed in it while dropping the monarchy. The Queen's role in Commonwealth nations was even more symbolic than in Britain, a ceremonial link to historical connections that some people valued and others considered a colonial remnant. The question of the monarchy's future arose periodically, especially after scandals or during periods of social change. Opinion polls showed support for the institution remained relatively strong but increasingly conditional on the monarchy behaving appropriately, avoiding scandal and not costing too much. The monarchy survived partly through careful management of its public image, partly through the Queen's personal popularity built over decades of dutiful service, and partly because replacing it seemed more trouble than keeping it. Elizabeth's death in 2022 at age 96 and the accession of Charles III demonstrated the monarchy's durability. The transition was automatic, requiring no election or confirmation. Charles became king the instant his mother died, by operation of law and constitutional custom. The machinery of government didn't pause. The symbolism shifted to a new person, but the institution persisted, its practices and limitations unchanged. Here's what the long story of England's monarchy actually reveals. Authority is a story people agree to believe. The crown has no inherent power. It only has the power that law and custom and collective agreement give it. What changed over 1,000 years wasn't the crown itself, but the story England told about the crown, and, crucially, who got to tell that story. You're standing in Westminster Abbey, where monarchs have been crowned since William the Conqueror, and you can see the layers of accumulated history physically present in the space. The chair used for coronations was built in 1300, commissioned by Edward I to hold the stone of Scone he'd stolen from Scotland, and it still serves its purpose more than 700 years later. The regalia, crown, sceptre and orb, combine medieval craftsmanship with modern symbolism. Some pieces date back centuries, while others are relatively recent additions. The ceremony itself mixes ancient ritual with contemporary meaning, creating a sense that this moment connects to something larger than the present. This is what the monarchy became, a repository of accumulated stories about nationhood, continuity and shared identity. The stories aren't necessarily accurate. Much of what we think of as ancient tradition was actually invented in the Victorian era, when the monarchy needed to reinvent itself for an industrial age. But they're powerful because people agree to treat them as meaningful. The crown connects modern Britain to Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, the Norman conquest, medieval law, Tudor centralisation, Stuart conflict, the Victorian Empire and 20th century democracy. Whether that connection is real or imagined matters less than the fact that people believe it and find value in it. The genius of the British constitutional monarchy is that it preserved the form of kingship while draining it of arbitrary power. This satisfied conservative instincts for tradition and continuity while allowing progressive development of democratic institutions. Instead of a revolution that swept away the old order completely, Britain experienced an evolution that adapted old forms to new purposes. The result was stability that let other institutions develop without constant disruption. Other countries tried different paths with varying success. France executed its king in 1793 and became a republic, then an empire under Napoleon, then a constitutional monarchy after his defeat, then a republic again in 1848, then an empire again under Napoleon III, then another republic after 1870. Each transition involved upheaval, violence, and constitutional crisis. Germany unified under a powerful emperor in 1871, tried parliamentary democracy after the First World War, suffered totalitarian dictatorship under Hitler, then split and eventually reunified after the Cold War. Russia's Tsars clung to absolute power until revolution swept them away in 1917, leading to communist dictatorship and everything that followed. Britain's monarchy survived by surrendering power gradually, reluctantly, but ultimately completely. Each surrender made the institution safer. Medieval kings who commanded armies could be overthrown by rivals. Tudor monarchs who enforced religious conformity created enemies. Stuart kings who claimed divine right triggered civil war, but constitutional monarchs who reigned without ruling, who symbolised without commanding, who embodied tradition without enforcing it. These monarchs were hard to oppose because they threatened nobody's freedom or welfare. The story isn't finished. Charles III became king in an era when monarchies seem archaic to many people, when the very idea of inherited privilege conflicts with democratic values, and when the royal family's wealth and status appear increasingly difficult to justify in a society that claims to value merit and equality. The monarchy's future depends on whether the stories it tells, about national identity, historical continuity, ceremonial dignity, and charitable service, continue to resonate with enough people to maintain the collective agreement that keeps the institution alive. What we can say is that England's monarchy succeeded by becoming unnecessary. When kings were essential, when they led armies, administered justice, made laws and collected taxes, their power was also dangerous, arbitrary, and often tyrannical. Individual rulers could be brilliant or incompetent, just or cruel, and wise or foolish, and the kingdom's fate depended on which you got. By accepting constitutional limits and by becoming symbolic rather than actual rulers, the crown paradoxically became more stable and durable. It no longer threatens anyone's freedom or welfare, so there's less reason to abolish it. It provides symbolic functions that some people value without exercising power that might provoke resistance. The long story of England told through its monarchs is really a story about how societies organise power, how they create legitimacy, and how they balance continuity with change. The crown began as something seized by force from rival claimants, became something inherited by custom within royal families, then something limited by law and precedent, then something shared with parliamentary institutions, and finally something purely symbolic that represents without ruling. Each transformation preserved the institution while fundamentally changing what it meant and how it functioned. The relationship between physical spaces and royal authority changed dramatically over this 1,000-year journey. Early Saxon kings ruled from wherever they happened to be, their authority existing in their person rather than in any building. Norman and medieval kings built castles that projected power through stone walls and military force. Tudor monarchs created bureaucracies that governed from offices in Westminster. Modern monarchs inhabit palaces that are museums and symbolic spaces rather than centres of actual power. The buildings remain, carefully preserved, but their function has shifted from practical to ceremonial. The story of documents parallels this evolution. Early law existed in memory and custom. transmitted orally and enforced personally. The development of written law, from Magna Carta to the Bill of Rights to countless Acts of Parliament, created authority that existed on parchment and paper, independent of any individual. The monarch's role gradually became defined by these documents rather than by personal power. Today, the monarch's powers are almost entirely formal, defined by constitutional conventions that aren't even written down, but exist as shared understandings about how things should work. As you drift towards sleep, consider this. Every stable system of government is built on collective stories about who has authority and why. Those stories change slowly, adapting to new circumstances while maintaining enough continuity that people can recognise themselves in the tradition. England's monarchy survived 1,000 years not because kings were powerful, but because the kingdom learned to constrain power, while preserving the ceremonies and symbols that make authority feel legitimate. The crown endures as a reminder that sometimes the most durable institutions are those that learn to yield rather than break, to adapt rather than resist, and to symbolise rather than command. What began as the personal authority of warlords who could gather armed followers became the constitutional authority of a state that governs through law, custom, and democratic consent. The crown remained constant through this transformation, but everything it meant changed. That paradox, continuity through change, might be the most English thing of all, and perhaps the real secret of the monarchy's survival. The accumulated story matters more than any individual chapter. No single king or queen created the modern constitutional monarchy. It emerged from centuries of conflict, compromise, and gradual evolution. The institution learned from each crisis, adapted to each challenge, and survived by becoming something different while remaining recognisably the same. That long, slow transformation from power to symbol, from command to ceremony, from ruling to reigning, that's the story of England's crown, and in many ways the story of England itself.